Hey, welcome to Firescale Audiobooks. If you enjoy our audiobooks, please consider subscribing to the channel. Also, feel free to share your review in the comments section below.
After a while, Gary felt fine enough to be able to walk on his own, yet he didn't know how to tell Kai that. His upperclassman was still carrying him over his shoulder, and it would be strange for Gary to recover this fast. After the fight he had, it wouldn't be too surprising if it would take a week to recover. Without any better idea, Gary just continued to play the role of an exhausted fighter. I really need to find a way to control this power. Whenever my heart rate rises, my whole body feels different. And then soon after, when it's all over, I get to a low point. By low, Gary was referring to his energy value, which would deplete after a while, and in his actual status, he had used a lot of energy points for healing as well that seemed to affect him. Eventually, Kai arrived at their school. "Are you going to be okay getting back on your own?" Kai asked. "I've noticed you're walking a lot better." Gary hadn't even noticed that Kai had stopped helping him as soon as they got close to the school, and he was standing fine, meaning his cover was blown. "Yeah, I'll be fine," Gary replied, nervously, his face turning a shade redder for having been caught. Fortunately, with how late it was, Kai didn't notice it, or at least pretended not to. "Good." Kai nodded while retrieving a bundle of cash and placing it into Gary's hands. "Here's 500 for today's fight." Gary had to repeat the number in his head, and he instinctively counted the cash to make sure the other boy wasn't joking. It was only a couple of days ago that he had received 500 for doing the most dangerous job ever, and now he was receiving this much because of one fight. "Is this how much I won for fighting?" Gary asked, still shocked, wondering why he had ever risked his life working as a transporter when he could have just become a fighter. "Actually, scratch that idea. What are you thinking, Gary? You would have lost every single fight before getting this system." His voice of reason reminded him. "Not quite. This is a low-level event, after all. Normally, you would have received between 100 and 200 bucks, depending on how exciting your match would have been. As an incentive from the arenas, you get some extra, depending on how many bets were placed because of your fight. Most of that is due to the bets I had made on you. As a newcomer, your odds are naturally horrendous, so great job pulling through. Since this was your debut fight, and you left quite an expression, it seemed kind of shabby, just giving you the minimum amount. Besides, I haven't forgotten that you came to me because you were in dire need of money. There's actually a lot more to it than that, but for now the rest of today's earnings will be set aside as gang funds for the future. I'll keep setting that money aside for a rainy day or when the gang needs expanding. Once our gang has grown into a respectable size, you'll have free reign over it," Kai explained casually as if he had planned this all along. "You'll let me have access to even more money than what I'm holding?" Gary questioned. His brain was trying to process all that information. He had just come out today to earn some cash, yet his partner in crime apparently had already made plans far beyond that. "Of course I will let you use the money. I'd advise you to discuss what to use it for with your future lieutenants. But as the leader of a gang, your word will be law," Kai answered nonchalantly. "Leader? Now hang on a moment. I know you said you wanted to form a gang and wanted me to work, but this is the first time I'm hearing anything about me being the leader of it. Why would you even do that? It's your gang," Gary complained. "Look, I've already made up my mind after watching you fight today. A gang needs a certain type of leader, and I think you're perfect for that role. Me, I will be the brains behind the whole thing. I don't really like being in the limelight anyway. It's not my style," Kai argued. However, Gary wasn't really convinced by that. In school, he stuck out like a sore thumb. Not to mention all the fancy jewelry and expensive clothes of his practically screamed, "Look at me. Do you really think you have much of a choice, Mr. Loyal Dog?" Kai teased him after seeing the unwillingness in the other's eyes. "Just think of it as being the public face of our gang. All you need to do for the time being is concentrate on getting stronger. For starters, you might want to pick up a proper style. Otherwise, Green Fawn might soon enough become infamous as Rabid Dog." Afterwards, they each went their separate ways. It had been a crazy evening, that was for sure, and it was hard for Gary to take everything in. Truth be told, he didn't take it all in. One event was just leading to another for him, but most of all, he just wanted to figure out this crazy system. Level 2. EXP 20/200. Before, Gary had 70 points of Express and needed 30 more points to level up. After defeating his opponent, he had gained 50 points of Express, bringing his total to 120 to 100. At least it looks like the EXP carries over, but the way quests come up is so random. The only one that is consistent is the workout one and eating food, since they're both daily quests. However, with the level up there also seem to be a few more changes. For one, he had received a stat point, which appears as if it could be used in a number of different ways. A stat point can be used to improve a user's basic stats, or can be used to increase one's health. If used on health or energy, it will be increased by 10 points. Wait, I have stats. Didn't see that before. What even are my stats? Thinking about this, another status screen appeared in front of him. Strength 4, Dexterity 3, Endurance 8. Looking at these numbers, Gary didn't really know how to gauge them at all, but he knew based on how high his endurance was that his strength and dexterity were extremely low. I knew I was weak, but that weak? So I have health, which seems to go down as my body gets injured. Then there's energy, which is used up just on a day-to-day basis, but if I start fighting more than it uses, it's similar to a stamina bar in a game. However, it can also be used in an emergency to heal my body as well. As for the normal stats, strength had to mean how strong I am, right? Dexterity must be things like speed, agility, and reflexes. I am pretty slow, so that makes sense, and then endurance. I'm glad to know that the only thing my body is good at is taking a beating, but I'm guessing some of that has to do with me turning into I don't even want to say the word. It feels like bad luck or something. Thinking about the fight that just occurred, Gary was wondering what the best way to use the stat point was. At first his mind thought something like dexterity would be most useful. He could become a counter hitter using opener's strength against them, especially if he was going to participate in more underground tournament fights. However, his mind started to wander, and he found himself thinking about the rugby match and how Xian thought he was kind of cool when he had tackled Blake. Don't be stupid. Your life is more important than getting some girl. Your energy has now increased to a maximum of 110. In the end, Gary had opted for increasing his energy. With the other basic stats, Gary wondered if he continued to go gym if they would change by themselves. His stats were based on how his body currently was, so he thought this was possible, but how would he increase his energy or his health without the system? The energy was important for him to fight for a long time, which would give him more time to come up with a way to defeat his opponents and also heal them up. To him, this was a no-brainer. There was one more message that had appeared in the middle of the match, and that was that Gary had acquired a new skill. Thinking about it again, another screen appeared in front of him. Current list of skills. Mark 0/5. Charging Heart new. He had already seen what a mark was and what it was meant to do, but it was interesting that he could only have 5 of them active at one time. Charging Heart. When activated, the user's heart rate will increase to 150 BPM. The skill will take 10 points of energy to use. When the user's heart rate is above 150, all physical stats will be doubled. Does that happen even if my heart rate rises that high on its own? That would explain where the sudden surge of strength came from, but if I had this in the last fight, I wouldn't have had to start thinking about. Anyway, this is good news. If only there was a skill that could lower it as well. After reading all the notifications, Gary thought it was time for him to head home. He couldn't stop counting the money that had been given to him as he walked. With this amount, depending on how regularly he earned it, he would be able to help out his family. He was still unsure how much he could rely on Kai, but it was working out for now. Using some of the money, Gary stopped by a 24-hour convenience store and bought some raw steaks. They were expensive, but his energy was low, and he knew to replenish it he needed to eat. Plus, it didn't hurt to treat himself once in a while. It was the middle of the night, so no one was around, and this time it was a lot easier for him to eat. He dug into the steaks so quickly that he didn't realize how much his body needed it. Daily quest complete. 5 EXP received. The quest to consume 2 kilograms of meat had already been completed, and it was nearly 1 o'clock at night. But this time, the EXP awarded was half that of before. Looks like I'll have to find other ways to gain EXP later. For now, I better head home, Gary thought, as he ran through the empty streets to his bed. The next day, with the sun rising, Tom was a little nervous. He had his silver pendant ready and his bag of chocolate. Gary, I hope what I'm thinking isn't true. After consuming the raw meat he had purchased from the convenience store, Gary's energy bar quickly started to fill up, and by the time he snuck back home, he already felt as good as he had before leaving for this nightly adventure. Waking up nearly 5 hours later, Gary's body felt completely fine. The teenager was unsure whether this meant that he could use the raw protein as an energy drink substitute to keep on going for as long as he needed, but at least his need for sleep appeared to have lessened. "I feel so alive," Gary thought, as he moved his body about and got ready to school before anyone else. His mother and sister were not even awake yet. There was one thing he was thankful for, though, the fact that his sister was keeping everything a secret for him. Gary was sure that she didn't know what he was doing, but since the two of them had to share a room, it had been impossible to hide the fact that he had disappeared from her. "Damn, I bet she's going to ask for some big favor later on," Gary lamented internally, as he scribbled a note for Amy to make sure she knew he had in fact returned and hadn't gone missing. Waking up before everyone else proved to be a blessing in disguise, especially since his acquired taste had changed. During his nightly trip to the convenience store, Gary had not only purchased meat for himself to consume. Right now, the Dim family fridge was fuller than it had been for weeks. If Mom asks where I got it from, I'll just say it was a gift from one of the local stores. Gary decided. He had already done this a few times during his work as a transporter, so it shouldn't stand out too much. Anything to lighten the load and stress of his mother. With all this newfound energy, Gary didn't waste time leaving before everyone else. Yet on the way out, he noticed all the letters that had piled up on the kitchen counter. A dozen more nights like yesterday, and it should help us get out of this mess. The only question is, how can I help us without having to explain where I got all this money from? Gary wondered. No normal 16-year-old should be able to get a job that would pay this well, at least not legally, and Gary wasn't exactly proficient in coming up with excuses. The fact that he was a miserable liar and his mother could instantly tell when he lied wasn't exactly in his favor. In fact, even his excuse about the convenience stores gifting them those products has been met with skepticism by her, the first few times he had brought it up. "I guess I'll just have to ask Kai. I'm sure he will know a way." Gary bemoaned the fact that he was relying more and more on his upperclassmen, but at least so far he had been keeping his promise, and it was undeniable that he knew how to make money. This early in the morning, barely anyone was out and about, but Gary still kept his hood up on the way to school. He was afraid that any moment now Damien and the underdogs could pop up. He was sure that they had not given up their manhunt on him, and he was already dreading opening up his phone. In fact, he was planning to purchase a new one after school and throw this into the river or perhaps bury it somewhere in the forest. Just as Gary was daydreaming how he could get rid of it without leaving a trail leading back to him, he suddenly spotted a particular girl up ahead. "She looks familiar. Hang on, isn't she the same girl who got in trouble with that color gang from before?" Gary soon enough had an epiphany about who it was. They were quite the distance away, but Gary was convinced. It was impossible for him not to recognize someone who indirectly forced him into playing the part of the hero. Despite the school crest on her uniform telling him that they were both visiting the same school, he had never actually seen her before he had rescued her, nor afterwards for that matter. Admittedly, he had completely forgotten all about her due to the plethora of other problems in his life right now, but seeing her again made him wonder what exactly she had done to get into trouble with the color gang. Didn't she learn her lesson last time? How could she walk this way while being on her own again? At this point, she's just asking for trouble. Gary shook his head in disbelief. He would have loved to just mind his business, but seeing as the two of them were using the same route, he couldn't just not look out for her. Eventually, Gary decided to catch up to her since there was no real reason for him to hide. He had followed her from a distance for a while and had been happy that there had been no encounters. However, a few moments ago, the girl had abruptly quickened her pace. The teenage boy had yet to realize that the girl had done so because she had felt that someone had been following her. "Let's see what I can do and how close I can get," Gary thought. Charging heart, activating the skill, he could feel his chest in great pain almost instantly, to the point he nearly fell over. His heart was beating as if he was sprinting even though he was just standing still. After the initial shock of impact was over, though, he now was filled with energy. 10 points from his energy stat had been consumed, and his heart was now above 150 BPM. With this new energy, Gary started walking faster, but he knew he couldn't just get straight up behind her, so he thought maybe there would be a better way. Going down one of the alleys behind a small apartment block, he looked at all the pipes and ledges from the windowsills. This is crazy, right? Am I really going to try this? It was only a few days ago where Gary couldn't do any type of physical activity, and now he was planning to scale the side of an apartment block. Leaping up, Gary had jumped higher than he had ever before and grabbed onto one of the ledges. He could feel his muscles working and soon propped his other arm up to grab onto the ledge with both of his arms up. The only way to progress further up was if he leapt up to the next windowsill or if he jumped to the metal pipe and attempted to climb that. After completing the first jump, he was full of confidence and swung his body over, but at the last second he hesitated. Still, his body weight had swung in motion and his fingertips had left the windowsill. "Ah, crap!" Gary shouted, as he had completely missed the metal pipe and had fallen onto the solid hard concrete. "That freaking hurt," Gary said, attempting to get up slowly. His heart was still beating fast, though, and his energy points were going down quicker than when he didn't use the skill. "I guess, even if the skill does make me stronger, it still doesn't change me. I need to get used to it." He started to flex his fingertips a bit and could see that the skin on it had slightly ripped as well, and his arms were now sore from holding onto the ledge, but he could feel the pain going away quickly. "I guess double my current strength and stats isn't so impressive. If I can improve my whole body shape and increase my stats, that will also make the skill more effective. I also have to be wary of my energy points. Using the skill itself takes up 10 energy points, and it almost feels like an adrenaline shot, but then I have less points to heal myself with. While getting my heart rate up naturally that high, it won't use the energy points initially. But other than thinking of that, I don't really have a good method of controlling my heart rate." Thinking of that said person, Gary almost forgot the reason why he was trying to scale the wall in the first place. He thought if he got up high, then maybe he could start leaping across rooftops while following the girl. It was a fantasy that was short-lived. Canceling the skill was easy, and Gary soon just stuck to what he was doing before as he exited out of the alleyway and attempted to catch up with the girl. The good news was there didn't seem to be any signs of trouble. Gary wasn't sure if it was because it was so early in the morning or if something else was going on. Eventually, though, they had reached the school, and, at least knowing this place was safe from others, he could take off his hood, but he didn't stop to follow the strange girl. "Damn, I feel like a stalker. Why am I still following her anyway? I was just going to protect her, right?" Gary thought, and eventually found himself on the third floor, where the senior students would be. He never expected her to be a senior student. Just as he was about to turn away, though, he saw the girl talking to someone else he knew, and it looked like the two of them were on good terms. "Is that Kai?" Gary thought. Without a doubt it was Kai. But why would these two know each other? He thought that anyone who would know Kai would also be involved in the underworld like he was. Thinking about this made him think about how the girl was also being attacked by the gang. Could it have something to do with Kai? Unfortunately, without getting any closer and being found out, Gary would just have to leave it at that, making his way back to his own class. Just outside, though, he managed to bump into someone that he was actually pleased to see. "Oh, Gary," Tom said, holding a carrier bag, and nearly stepped back after seeing Gary. "What's the matter? You seem a little jumpy. Is everything okay?" Gary asked as he walked past and entered the classroom, putting his bag on the desk. He was happy to see Tom, because Tom was the only normal thing he still had left of his ordinary life, and he was hoping talking to him would remind him of the time before all this craziness. Tom went to touch the pen in his pocket. He grabbed it for a second and was wondering just how he would get Gary to wear it or touch it, even if he could, or if it would do anything. "Hey, do you mind if I show you a magic trick?" Tom asked. "If it starts hurting him, I'll take it off straight away and I'll know the truth." "Okay, but I didn't know you were into magic now as well," Gary replied. "Just keep your palm open and close your eyes for a second," Tom said. That's when Gary could hear it. Something was definitely up with Tom. The two of them weren't far from each other, and now he could hear it. He could hear Tom's heartbeat, beating faster and faster. Is he that nervous that the magic trick is going to fail? Gary thought, and closed his eyes, opening the palm of his hand to give him more confidence, then holding the silver chain with the pendant. Tom was about to place it in his hand when he started to have second thoughts. Why am I doing this? Shouldn't I just ask? Tom thought, as he felt a little bad. He was tricking his longtime best friend. Due to how long it was taking, Gary got impatient. Come on, Gary said, having opened his eyes and grabbed the pendant. He then looked at it and wondered what it was. Tom nearly shouted out, telling him to stop, but there seemed to be no reaction at all. A big, huge smile appeared across his face instead. Did I ruin the trick? Gary asked. Yeah, but don't worry, I need more practice anyway, Tom said, as he took the pendant away and placed it back into his pocket. What the hell was I thinking? Gary, a werewolf. Maybe I've been reading too many novels. Tom thought. Hey, so what's in the bag? Gary called out. Oh, this, he replied, opening it up and pulling out a large chocolate bar. He then threw it over with no worries at all to his friend. I had a craving in the middle of the night, but I can't eat all this on my own, so decided to bring it in. Tom smiled. Class hadn't started yet, as the students were still coming in. The tutor had arrived, but wouldn't take the student register until the bell rang anyway. So, Gary thought it wouldn't be bad to take a nice bite of chocolate. After all, recently everything he had been eating was a little strange. Not having a care, Gary nearly bit half of the chocolate bar off, as if he didn't have a care in the world, when suddenly he felt his throat swelling up. He placed his hands around his throat, as if he couldn't breathe. Gary, are you okay? What's wrong? Tom asked. Soon, Gary's body couldn't take it anymore, as it rejected the chocolate, throwing up the contents in his stomach. It spread across the whole floor, and soon all the students stepped away. What is that? Is that bile? But why is it so red? The students thought. He threw up. Why'd he throw up? Don't tell me it was from a chocolate bar. Tom started to panic. Is that blood? That can't be healthy. Should we call him an ambulance or something? The students started to mumble to each other, unsure how to react given the situation. Gary could hear everyone around him whisper, but he was too busy after throwing up. At least, he started to feel a lot better after doing so, but his sense of balance was off, and holding himself up, he had his arm on his chair. You have come into contact with a substance that is poisonous to you. Dash 20 HP, 80/100 HP. Until your body has broken down the poison, you are unable to heal. What is happening to me? Gary thought as he struggled to realize what had just happened. As if his luck wasn't bad already, the next person to come into class turned out to be Exian. The new girl was at first confused about what was going on, but following the direction everyone was pointing at, she quickly started to get the picture. If he's ill, then why did he come to school in the first place? Exian wondered as she walked over and saw all the red vomit on the ground with different chunks of meat that strangely enough looked to be raw. More and more students began to enter the classroom, and one of them started to scream at the sight of the vomit. What is that? Why is it so red? That's disgusting. Someone get him out of here. A group of girls huddled up and screamed. Exian turned to look at them, only to recognize the ringleader as the one who had been so heavily interested in Blake when they had been watching the rugby match. If she wasn't wrong, the girl had introduced herself as Tiffany, and it was clear she was the one that everyone seemed to follow. Tiffany's right. He could be infected with something throwing up like that. He could pass all the disease on to us. Get him out of here. A boy agreed, quickly checking up on the class diva. What have I done? Tom still tried to make heads and tails of the suddenly devolved situation. Shit, I never thought it could have such an effect on you. Gary, don't you die on me, man. I can't be responsible for killing you. While the rest of the class was busy ostracizing him, the first one to approach turned out to be none other than Exian. What's wrong with you all? Are you sure you're all high schoolers and not just a bunch of kindergarten kids? Have you never seen anyone get sick before? You act as if he is the carrier of a deadly disease when I bet the poor guy must have just drunk some tomato juice or something before coming here. Teacher, I'll take him to the nurse's office. She pulled his arm up onto her shoulder and was ready to take him away. When Gary turned his head, even though he was still feeling groggy, he recognized who it was. Are you an angel? Gary blurted out, his words slurping like a drunk man. Easy there, Romeo. If you have the energy to spout such fluttery bullshit, then get a grip and help me bring you to the nurse's office. Exian replied. If it had not been for his miserable situation, she would have been convinced he was hitting on her. Wait, let me do it. Tom insisted as he clenched his fist. After all, This entire situation was his fault. He had been so focused on wanting to find out the truth about his best friends that he had failed to consider the consequences of his actions. You probably don't know where the nurse's office is yet, and he's my best friend. Let me take him, Tom argued, ashamed that the new girl was the first and only one who had been willing to help Gary. Xian was a bit surprised that Tom wanted to take over with such enthusiasm, but she saw no need to argue, as long as someone helped the poor guy. Damn, Gary, can you please stop leaning on me so hard? You should know that the only muscles I have are in my fingers. Tom complained in a hushed tone as soon as the two of them had exited the classroom. With the two of them gone, Xian looked over the contents of the vomit one more time before looking at their desks when she noticed something. Tom had placed his carrier bag down on his table, and it was full of chocolate while Gary's seat had a half piece of eaten Chlorate bar on his table. Was the green-haired guy allergic to chocolate? Shouldn't his best friend have known that? While looking at the table, someone suddenly grabbed her shoulder. Driven by instinct, she grabbed the offender's wrist and spun the person around. The next second, she had dug her hip into them and flipped them onto the ground, right into the vomit. Only after finishing her routine did Xian suddenly realize what she had done. Oh no, why did we have to practice throws all day yesterday? Xian cursed as she looked at Tiffany, whose blonde hair was now covered with the red vomit. I'm sorry, let me help you up. Xian quickly apologized, offering her hand, but the other party, unsurprisingly, slapped it away. You bitch! Tiffany shouted in anger. What the hell did you do that for? Thanks to you, I have puke all over me. The two of her friends suddenly appeared behind Tiffany and were now standing behind Xian. One of them was a small girl with short purple hair, while the other was quite macular with black pigtails. I swear it was a complete accident. You startled me when you came up on me. What possible reason would I have to do this to you on purpose when I don't even really know you? Xian tried to explain herself. She wasn't the least bit afraid of the physical capabilities of the two goons who had placed themselves in between the two girls as if to protect their queen bee. No, she was just unwilling to deal with the possible aftermath this could have if left unresolved. Her father had warned her to not use her fists. Even though he was the mayor, it wasn't like the times of the past where they had the highest authority. In reality, they had to obey and comply with the many gangs that really ran the area and angering the wrong people. Not even he could help her. The last thing she wanted to do was make her dad's stressful job even harder. You think a simple sorry is going to cut it? Tiffany bellowed at X, her eyes filled with anger and malice. She could easily just wash off the puke, but nothing could change the fact that everyone in the classroom had seen her make a fool of herself. It was practically a given that rumors would spread about her being Puke Girl. The teacher cleared his throat, reminding everyone that he was still there, and the sudden tension seemed to relax as the two girls helped Tiffany up. The adult wanted to say something as they walked out of the classroom, but with a glare from her, he quickly zipped his mouth shut. Screw me. Judging by her eyes, there is no way she is just going to let things go. Xian sighed, wishing she could just turn back time a couple minutes to avoid all of this drama. Tom and Gary had eventually made it to the nurse's office. Fortunately, Gary's metabolism was doing a good job expelling that poison, allowing him to slightly recover. His system had even told him that he was no longer poisoned. Gary, you've been coming in here quite a lot. The nurse shook her head. Well, I guess you can't really help it if you ate something bad. Just make sure to not eat that stuff again, and for the time being, take this medicine. It should be able to help you. It might be for the best if you rest here for the first period, and we will see how you do after that. If you still feel unwell, I'm going to have to recommend you go to the hospital. There is no way I can go to a hospital. If they find out what I am, who knows what they will do with me? Gary thought, but outwardly he just nodded weakly. I'll stay with him and make sure he takes the medicine. Tom volunteered and closed the curtain. The nurse had left a small round pill next to a white cup with water for Gary to take, but Tom wasn't sure that it would help. Since Gary had reacted so violently to chocolate that he had been able to eat without any issues in the past, who was to say how he would react to these pills? The next second, Tom placed the pills in his own mouth and drank the water, gulping it down. Tom, what the dash? Why did you do that? Don't tell me you've become a pie popper. Gary exclaimed, worried for his friend. "No, you idiot," Tom whispered back in an angry voice. He pulled the curtain back to see if the nurse was still there, and while she seemed completely focused on her phone call. Whatever it was, it seemed to have been important and urgent, because soon after she hung up, she left the room, telling the boys she would be back in a few minutes. "Good, she's gone. We can finally talk." Tom sighed out a breath of relief, while Gary was still confused about why Tom was acting so mysterious. While his body might have recovered, he still had trouble thinking clearly. "Gary, do you even know what happened back there and why you got sick?" Tom asked. "I have no idea. Maybe it's the raw meat I've been eating." Gary blurted out without thinking, continuing to speak before thinking about what he said. "Raw meat," Tom repeated while his hands were shaking. He had to reassure himself that the one before him was still good, old, harmless Gary, and not the beast he had tested him to be. "Gary, I have noticed you have been behaving super strange these last couple of days. I gave you the chocolate to test a hypothesis of mine, but I didn't want to hurt you. I never thought it would turn out this way. Please, you gotta believe me. You know you can tell me anything, right? So I gotta ask, Gary, are you a werewolf?" As soon as the question was asked, Gary could feel the palms of his hands getting sweaty and his heartbeat rising. These weren't good signs, especially if he was going to try and hide it from Tom. He placed his hand on his chest and knelt over slightly, appearing to be in pain. "What's wrong? Is the chocolate still hurting you?" Tom asked worriedly as he knelt down to see if his friend was okay. "Gary, you shouldn't deny it. Being able to poison you is proof that I'm right," he suggested as he pointed his finger at Gary, taking on a pose, as if he was some famous detective who had just solved the case. The sight of Tom acting so ridiculous was somehow enough to calm Gary's heart rate down a little. "Come on, don't you find it ridiculous? Chocolate being some sort of kryptonite for a werewolf. Next thing you will tell me you're a vampire or a dragon." Gary tried to joke around, but the nervous smile on his face made him appear all the more guilty. He himself was struggling whether it might be better to just admit to it or not. So far, he tried to make sense of all those changes to his body by himself, having to learn all these new things on his own. He would actually welcome having someone to talk to about all those. Sometimes he didn't know if he was doing the right thing or not, but thinking about it, he couldn't imagine someone better than his trusted friend Tom. Since accusing him and trapping him into a corner didn't seem to have worked, Tom tried a different approach. "Look, I know that the chocolate alone would be ridiculous, but then how do you explain suddenly being able to tackle Blake? Or the puncture wounds on it? You were the only one who held it yesterday. If you have some other explanation, then I'm all ears. I'm your best friend, right? I'm not here to hurt you, and I just want you to know that we can handle this together," Tom offered in a soft voice. From the look on Gary's face, this approach worked far better. He had already been on the verge of telling Tom, but with Tom pulling on his heartstrings, it was hard to remain silent. However, now the question was, how much should he tell Tom? Admitting to it also meant he would have to come clean about his work as a member of the Underdogs gang, who had handed him the metal suitcase that had that strange werewolf system inside of it. But if he were to tell Tom, there was a big risk of dragging him into all of this mess. "You know what?" Tom asked while Gary was still debating on how much to reveal. "I'm just going to take your silence as a yes. I mean, you aren't even denying it like you were just seconds ago. Now I have done a lot of research into this matter, because I know you're bad with all this fantasy mumbo-jumbo. I don't exactly know how much lore is true out there, but now that I have finally met a real werewolf and he's my friend, it's better to be safe than sorry. From all the stuff I have read on the internet, they all pretty much have one thing in common. All sources seem to agree that on the night of full moon, a werewolf turns without being able to control it. That gives us only 12 days to think of a way to restrict you. Otherwise, you might just go on a rampage, killing everyone." When Tom said these words, he looked directly at Gary, staring him in the eye, not facing away. Tom, his friend who never confronted anyone and was bad at all types of physical activity, looked powerful and reliable at this moment. What worried Gary even more was that he already knew that something was indeed going to happen on the night of the full moon. His system had given him a quest titled Your First Turning that had a countdown for that day. Even more worrisome was the fact that his quest only specified that he would have to survive. Since Gary still wasn't saying anything, Tom sighed and was ready to leave the room. He had already done whatever he could and was now hoping that either he had been very wrong, something he seriously doubted after all the time he had put into thinking things over, or that Gary would come to him eventually to confess things on his own. "Wait," Gary called out. "Fine. Since you've already figured things out, you might as well know the whole thing. You're right. I'm a werewolf," Gary admitted, his face going red, saying those words out loud, especially in front of someone who could hear him. Closing the door, after making sure nobody else had been around, Tom turned towards Gary and jumped for joy, a sparkle in his eyes. "I knew I was right. Tell me, Gary, since when were you a freaking werewolf? How did this happen? Did you venture into the woods at night? Didn't Alpha Wolf come, greet you, and turn you? What the hell happened?" Tom asked a barrage of questions he had prepared, not being able to contain his excitement. "Oh man, now my version sounds so boring in comparison. I just got turned by a briefcase." Gary smiley wryly, as he went on to explain the gist of the story. Since the whole werewolf situation was already much to take in, Gary decided to omit the fact that he had been a gang member, and technically was now in another gang, from his explanation. Instead, he told Tom that he had taken a part-time job delivering items, like a delivery driver. Of course, since he was 16 and still in school, all of this was illegal, hence why he had hid the job from Tom. Technically, all of it was true, so Gary's face didn't betray him for once. After that, he came mostly clean, sharing how he had been sent out, how other people had wanted to steal the package, and how the package had suddenly opened, turning him into a werewolf. After saying everything he needed to say, he waited to see just how Tom would treat him after all of this. Would years of friendship be thrown away? This was a worrying thought for Gary. All this from a simple package? "I've never heard of such a thing happening before," Tom commented as he placed his hand on his chin. "It doesn't really help that you didn't even see what was in the package, because you said you passed out." This bit was partly true, only that Gary had passed out due to being stabbed. I wonder how Tom would react if I told him the real story. I guess I can tell him once everything is cleared up. And I will also have to tell him about Kai eventually. We need to look into where that package actually came from. This could be a big deal. And if it's a big company, they might even send people after you to get their little experiment back. It's best if you keep this a secret, Tom noted. Gary gulped, and was surprised at how quickly his friend had grasped the entire situation. What's more, the case that Tom was worried about was actually occurring. Fortunately, that at least meant Gary didn't have to tell him to keep this whole thing a secret either. "Well, for what you told me, it really does seem to be the case that your heart rate might be connected to your transformation. So learning how to control it should be the first thing on the agenda. For the next few days, we should also observe your behavior. Haven't seen any huge signs yet, but you might start to get a little bit more moody the closer we are to the full moon. I would also advise you to drop out of the rugby team." "Drop out of the rugby team? But then how am I meant to impress XIN?" Gary blurted out. "Really, Gary? Do you think now is the time to be worried about how to impress the new girl?" Tom facepalmed. "Part of you transformed when it was you against Blake. What will you do when it actually occurs in the middle of a match? You could hurt or even kill others. Come on, I'm not a monster." Gary tried to defend himself. Unfortunately, his first ever transformation was testimony that Tom did have a point. Alas, the hormones in Gary's body were unwilling to lose this opportunity. Besides, don't you think if I put myself in more situations where I have to control my heart rate, that it would help me get better at it? "Arg, fine. It's not like I can force you to do it. You know your body better than me, after all." Tom was still worried, but he knew Gary long enough to know how stubborn he could be. "Speaking off, it's a shame, but it looks like I'm going to have to eat all that chocolate I brought myself," Tom joked, and the two of them were soon well on their way to being the same pair they were once again. Once the poison effect had worn off, Gary could use his energy to heal his body once again, but the energy didn't seem to recover, and as his energy went down, he could feel a hunger in his stomach. It was a small pain like a cramp, but he could bear with it for now. "I have to keep this energy bar up. When I'm fighting, it doesn't seem to bother me so much, but when I'm doing nothing, it hurts. Hopefully it doesn't get worse. Once it falls lower, I can't exactly bring raw meat to the school." Gary thought. Since Gary was feeling better, the two of them were walking down the hallway heading to their next class. They had decided to stay in the nurse's office until the bell had rang, allowing them to skip the first 2 periods and now could go out on break with each other. The kids filled the hallways as everyone was excited to get a nice breath of fresh air. Now that Tom and Gary had cleared the air a bit, they were chatting as they did until they banged into what felt like a solid wall in front of them. It was so sudden that Tom nearly fell to the floor, but Gary's quick reflexes allowed him to grab Tom by the hand and pull him back up before he did fall over. "Looks like we got a little superhero over here," the student said that was towering over the two of them. When Gary looked at the person, he noticed that there were two of them and recognized them straight away, Barry and Gil. Although they didn't share any classes together, they were part of the same club, the rugby club. These two were part of the scrum in rugby, one of the ones that would fight over each other as they locked and pushed forward the other meaty guys. They were essentially walls of muscle, explaining why it had felt like they had literally run into the wall. But there's one thing for certain. Tom looked at the hallway, and it was plenty wide enough for them all to walk in and more. "Did you bang into us on purpose?" Tom questioned, a pissed-off look on his face. "Watch it, scrub. You were the ones who didn't pay attention. I still haven't heard a single sorry from either of you." Barry went and grabbed the scruff of Tom's neck. "We were just waiting here for a chance to talk to the onion head over there. Look, Gary, drop out of the rugby team. We all know what you did against Blake was a fluke, and if you join us, it means one of us regulars will have to warm the bench and become your substitute." Gil explained, but then noticed that Gary wasn't looking at him at all. Instead, he was clearing towards Will, who was holding Tom by his collar. Suddenly, Barry felt Gary grab onto his wrist. "Let go of him now," Gary demanded. Of course, seeing someone so small act like that, Gil wasn't afraid, but the same couldn't be said for Barry, as he felt something when looking into his eyes. Bloodlust has been detected. A force bond has been activated. Know those eyes, if I don't do something, Gary might just snap. Tom thought. A notification screen had appeared in front of Gary, one containing new unfamiliar terms, but blinded with rage he ignored it as he continued to hold onto Barry's wrist. Slowly his grip was getting tighter and tighter. "Shit, my wrist is starting to feel a little numb. How much power does that onion head have?" Barry thought. "Hey look, it's Mr. Root," Tom suddenly exclaimed, making Barry let go of him. Both Gil and Barry turned around, and in that moment Tom grabbed his friend and quickly pulled Gary away, dragging him down the hallway and into one of the other classrooms. Since it was still break, it is currently empty. "Are you all right now?" Tom asked, as he could even feel his heart settling. "It looked like you were ready to jump that guy." "I don't know, man. I just got so angry when that guy grabbed you. Who the hell do they think they are? It's one thing to go after me, but you have nothing to do with it," Gary answered, clenching his fists again. Tom knew that Gary had a tendency to be hot-headed, but this seemed to be a bit out of character, even for him. He was normally the guy who would try to run away from a confrontation, but now he seemed to be actively seeking it, making Tom fear that his werewolf self might have already started to influence Gary. "I'll need to keep an eye on him. This time his aggression might have been triggered because he wanted to protect me, but what if it becomes worse? Who knows what he'll do if there's nobody to stop him?" Tom worried. "Look, it's over. I'm fine, right? We both are. Those guys were just two assholes. Heck, the world is full of people like that, but we can't just go around beating them all up, even if you're stronger than them," Tom stated, before he added jokingly, "I mean, if you tried, you would be busy 24/7. Then you wouldn't have time to impress a certain someone." Hearing this, Gary started to calm down a little, as he realized that Tom was right. The second part especially helped his best friend get into a better mood, although Gary's heartbeat was now rising slightly for a different reason. If word got out about what Gary could actually do, then it wouldn't just be the underdogs gang after him, but whoever had asked them to deliver the suitcase in the first place. Now that he had calmed down a little, Gary went on to check just what that message from before was. "Force bond has been activated. 1/5 marks have been assigned. A force bond is put on a target when enough bloodlust is dedicated towards a certain person, making them a hunting target. Those that are marked are given a unique scent, allowing the user to track them down at any point in time. Additional stats will be awarded if one manages to successfully hunt their target down. Those marked due to a force bond will be the first people to be targeted during a full moon." Gary's eyeballs widened as he read the screen and came to a few realizations. The force bond seemed to be a different subtype of his mark skill. He had already encountered the bond mark, which allowed him to mark certain people based on agreements, whereas the force bond seemed to be automatically assigned based on pure bloodlust. Both types of bonds seemingly occupied one of Gary's 5 slots. He was unsure whether there was a maximum of any one type of bond, although he felt like it didn't matter how much he had of one or the other. The major difference seemed to be that a forced bond directly designated the other party as a hunting target, whereas the bond mark only did so in case of a broken promise. The most worrying thing of all was the fact that the message had warned him that those that had been marked would become his target during a full moon. Gary gulped as he thought of what could possibly happen. If I really do turn in 12 days' time, doesn't that mean I'm going to kill Barry if I don't learn how to control myself? He couldn't be too sure until it happened, but it was something he didn't want to risk. Screw this, if I can assign these marks, then there has to be a way to get rid of them, right? Exiting the room, the 2 boys were now ready to head back to class and finally participate in their normal school day. Fortunately, they didn't run into any more trouble along the way. As Gary entered the halls, he noticed something. He could see a strange, lingering red marking in the air, and it wafted into his nose, making a particular smell. It smelled similar to the scent of raw food. It was faint, and as he followed it, it took on a stronger shade of red. It looked like a strange, floating red fog. He looked at Tom, but the other appeared blissfully unaware of what Gary was perceiving. Following the marking quickly, it led to a certain classroom, and as Gary looked through the window, he could see where the red smoke was leading right to Barry, who was now sitting in his seat. Is this what the marking does? Does it leave a trail so I can find them around the school? Maybe I should try to activate a bond mark on Kai after all. It would be handy to be able to find him whenever I need, and I would also instantly know if he broke the promise. Shit, but if he does, then that would make him another hunting target. Or maybe this thing only follows things that are meant to be hunted. Still, in 12 days' time, if he didn't find a way to remove the marking Barry, he might be in trouble. There wasn't much Gary could do for now in general with his powers. He was only a level 2 after all. Although he may have the power to become superhuman at certain moments, he still wasn't the best when it came to fighting on top of other things. Not to mention it was a secret in the first place, so it was best he stayed out of trouble. The classes continued as normal, with a few people staying away from Gary. They were a little worried about his red sickness from earlier, but it looked like it had been cleaned while they had been at the nurse. XIN was also in the classroom, but she was unable to concentrate properly due to Tiffany staring daggers at her. When the day had finally come to an end, it was time for everyone to head to their club activities. The members of the club were to appear on the rugby field for training, and when they arrived, they could see both Barry and Gil staring at the 2 of them. Damn those guys, it looks like they didn't quite get the message, huh? Gil said provocatively. However, Barry stayed quiet. He looked down at his covered wrist, which had been bruised and was slightly red. His better judgment was telling him that it might be better not to get involved with Gary after all. The rugby team had been together for a long time now, and it had been a while since anyone new had joined them. That was also the reason why the duo had wanted to scare Gary away. Even if he were to tattle on them, Gary knew they wouldn't back down, so it was pointless. The training had continued like usual, at least at the start it did. It was clear that during the practices, the regular members were doing everything they could to target Gary. Covering him even when he didn't have the ball, even tackling him when he didn't have the ball, and lastly, hitting him in the gut when they were in the middle of a scrum. Each time, Tom had to be there to calm him down, but he could tell it was getting worse. Thankfully, they had made it through the whole training session without Gary retaliating. At the end of the class, Mr. Root had an announcement to make. All right, everyone, our first match is going to be in around a week's time, and we'll be going up against Eaton High, so you better be on top of your game. As for you, Gary, remember you're part of the team now, so watch yourself. Mr. Root shouted at them. Among the club members and the actual rugby members, they all started to mumble and share odd looks on their faces as they talked about the upcoming team. Although a newbie, Gary knew why. Eaton High's rugby team wasn't exactly the strongest, but that also wasn't Mr. Root's main worry. Eaton High had a reputation for being one of the roughest schools in the entire town, a place where gangs frequently recruited their next members upon graduation. There were even a few students that already belonged to different small-time gangs, some even from a different city. There were rumors going around how oftentimes certain members of the opposing teams would end up in accidents right before big games. This was why Mr. Root had cautioned him to be safe. Living in this city, everyone knew that the ones actually in charge were the gangs, so the students of Eaton High were certainly special. If Mr. Root is even telling us to be careful, then it has to be true, one of the members said. When the game was over, a certain member had decided to approach Gary, and it was one he wasn't expecting. "Hey there, Gary. I see your nose is all better. Sorry about that again," Blake said, as he smiled, showing his beautiful teeth. "Damn it, I can't stay around this guy. If XIN sees me next to him, it's going to make me look like a frog and him a prince." "Yeah, don't worry about it. It wasn't as bad as I thought," Gary replied to cut the conversation short. "Do you mind if the two of us walk home? There is something I wanted to talk to you about, and I think it might be better for you," Blake offered, as his eyes moved to the corner, and the other members, including Gil and Barry, were looking towards their direction. Tom, seeing this, and living in the complete other direction, decided to head home. "Hey, Gary, you go ahead. Take your time to think about the stuff we talked about earlier. Just remember to give me a call tonight." "Okay," Tom said and ran off. Tom was still hoping that Gary would quit the rugby team like he had asked. It was the best choice in the end. Gary didn't really want to walk with Blake, but it was obvious that the athlete was offering to shield him from the others. Out of all the members who were on the rugby team, Blake was the most reasonable and easiest to talk to. "Sure, we can walk for a bit," Gary answered as he put on a fake smile, and the two of them headed off. As Gary and Blake started to walk off, they passed by the front gate where Kai was standing with his eyes half closed. When Gary walked past, he opened them and gave him a little wink before continuing onward. Who could he be waiting for? A girlfriend, perhaps? Gary wondered. Seeing him and Blake walk off, Kai continued to wait at the gate until a student in a dark blue uniform different to theirs had arrived. A boy who had his hands banged up all the way to his knuckles. "You wear those things, even in school? That must be uncomfortable," Kai commented with a smirk. "You never know when you're going to need to fight. Not in this day and age. Anyway, I believe you still owe me the promised sum of money," Inu reminded Kai. As soon as he said it, a bundle of cash flew right towards him. "Here you go. I always keep my word," Kai said as Inu happily counted the money. "I did a little bit of research on you. Turns out you went to Eaton High last year. Since you agreed to join our little gang, mind telling me what exactly happened that forced you to transfer to another school?" Kai questioned as the two of them began to walk off. From the look on Inu's face, it wasn't a pretty story at all, and it was clear that they were bad news. There was a park not far away from Gary's school. It had a playground with swings, benches, climbing frames, and all sorts of other things, making it a popular hangout spot for the younger kids, whereas the older ones usually played soccer once school was out. "Erg, isn't this a weird place to discuss things?" Inu asked as he looked at all the little kids and mums around. "Don't you guys have your own place? You know, a regular hideout spot like an abandoned warehouse or something?" When Inu had followed after Kai, he had expected to be led into that type location. Instead, they had gone to this park, and on their way a girl had started tagging along. The gold and black outfit made it obvious that she was part of Kai's group, but so far she hadn't even said a word. Inu couldn't help but think she didn't belong in the underworld, except for a damsel in distress perhaps. "Nope, don't have one of those yet," Kai replied matter-of-factly. "Come to think of it, I didn't really have time to fill you in last night." "Oh well, no better time than the present. Right now, there's just you, Green Fong, who you've already met, and this here's or Marie is a full name." For the first time, Kai seemed to acknowledge the girl's existence, who in turn just bowed. Inu wasn't sure if she was just shy around him or if she might be mute. Inu's mouth opened wide in disbelief, and he slapped his forehead. "I thought he looked like someone who knew what he was doing. Was I wrong about him? Is he just some rich kid who has too much of daddy's money and decided to create a gang after all? Heck, can we even be called that? Right now, we seem more like a group of friends, if anything. And why did he exclude himself?" Eventually, he sighed in defeat. Inu had never been the type to go back on his word. He might have been someone whose academic performance would only qualify him for construction-based jobs, but at least he had integrity. The best way he knew how to make money was with his hands, knees, and elbows, which was why he had chosen to fight in the fighting event in the first place. Don't worry, Kai spoke up with a smile on his face. Every prominent gang started out just like us. I promise you that as long as you stay with us, you won't regret it. Our group will be one that focuses on quantity over quality, so you should be proud that you even qualified. Hearing Kai's arrogant tone wasn't making Inu feel any better about the decision he had made. Talk was cheap in his opinion, but as long as the money would continue to flow, he wouldn't complain. Anyway, I believe you wanted to know about my past with Eaton High. What they're like and why I transferred, correct? Well, I'm sure you've heard the rumors. Let me tell you, it's worse than what they say. All the delinquents the other school deem incorrigible get sent to Eaton High, and the school welcomes them happily. Calling it the garbage heap for the scum of society would still be putting it mildly. The only reason it doesn't get shut down is that this makes it the perfect recruitment place for gangs. Heck, it wasn't even rare for some to come from other cities. Other schools might have a top dog, one that at least instills a sort of order, but Eaton High is more of a lawless zone. Not all of them behave like wild animals, but whatever factions there seem to change on a weekly basis. It's rather common for multiple weak factions to gang up on stronger ones just to put them in their place. They are not afraid to use weapons either. Inu's fists tensed as he explained the situation, thinking about what had happened to him before. It wasn't hard for Kai to puzzle his past together with that much information. Anyone could see from the way he fought that Inu was capable of becoming the top dog in most schools. They must have ganged up on him so badly that he had to transfer. Anyway, why did you want to know about Eaton High so much? Ina finally asked. At the same time, Gary and Blake were both busy walking down the street, heading the same way home. If the high schooler were to use one word to describe the current situation, it would be awkward. That must have been the 10th time a girl has looked our way. Gary thought bitterly. Their faces would turn a shade redder when they peeked at Blake, only to turn sour upon seeing the one walking beside him. What hurt Gary even more was they didn't even try to hide the obvious difference in treatment. I want to apologize, Gary. Blake's opening line surprised him. I have heard that Barry and Gil have bothered you during the break, and I've seen how the guys have been hazing you during the training. I'm the captain, so it's my responsibility to make sure things like that don't happen. Scratching the back of his head, Gary didn't really know what to say. Blake was the last person who should have to apologize to him. He seemed to be a person who really cared about the rugby team, making Gary feel bad since his primary reason for joining was to impress XIN. Was it really okay for him to take another player's position just because of his infatuation? It's not your fault. I understand how they feel. Gary replied eventually. Besides, isn't that like an initiation ritual between guys? No, it's not right. You're part of the team now. Instead of messing with you, they should get along with you and help you integrate with the team. Given your talent, you will be a great asset. I'm going to have a word with them all tomorrow so they don't pull that stupid crap on you again. If they cause you any more trouble, I want you to come to me. Blake stopped walking and turned around, staring right at Gary, offering his hand. How could someone be this nice in a Tier 3 city? Who the hell could hate him? Gary thought, looking at the hand in front of him. He was reluctant to shake it, since he had already repaid Barry. He only had so much time to find a way to remove the force bond from that poor guy to prevent him from ending up as the secret ingredient in a berry burger. Just as Gary was about to make up some excuse, he noticed someone coming up to them. They were coming at the two boys fast, and one was holding an object, swinging towards Blake. Duck! Gary warned the athlete, moving forward. He was about to push Blake's head down, but surprisingly his classmate had instantly followed the instruction. Not expecting to grab at nothing but air, Gary helplessly watched as the wooden plank connected with his cheek. The attack had enough force behind it that his body fell to the floor, leaving him with the taste of iron. Gary, Blake called out, seeing his classmate lying on the floor with blood dripping from his mouth. He understood they were in trouble, so Blake quickly spun around, moving forward slightly. He heard the sound of something hitting the ground where he had just stood. In total, there were 4 guys all wearing the Eaton High School uniform. 2 of them had wooden planks, while the others looked to be unarmed. However, it was just as possible that their weapons were concealed. Hey, looks like one of them is fast. The Eaton High student who had just missed chuckled. He wouldn't be the ace of their team if he wasn't. The other one with the plank, who had just hit Gary, joined in the laughter. Up until now, Blake had only heard about this type of incident Mr. Root had warned them about earlier. Their PE teacher had once called him into his office, stressing to Blake that he was the most likeliest target. All the opponents Eaton High had faced had their ace involved in some accident right before a match. However, Blake had never expected them to be so brazen to attack someone in the open like this. They were away from school, but the police shouldn't be too far away. The only reason they could be so confident in attacking them here was if they had the backing of a gang of some sort. Then it wouldn't matter if the police were informed or not. These guys don't look like pushovers when it comes to fighting either. Who knows when the police will come? Or if it even does. Blake started to worry. One of the high school students without any weapons tried to punch Blake, but before he could reach Blake, the ace of the rugby team quickly kicked the student's thigh. It caused it to go numb, and his punch weakened slightly. Still, the punch was coming towards his head as the kid gritted his teeth. Pain alone didn't seem to stop him, or perhaps he was just pissed off enough to want revenge. Whatever the case, it didn't matter to Blake, because he just wanted to weaken the punch slightly as he went forward with his forehead. When the punch connected, the Eaton High student's wrist bent awkwardly and his fingers were in pain. When his body with the plank came over, Blake made sure to remain calm, pushing his wrist and moving so the student would be off balance, then kicking him at the back of his leg where the knee would be, allowing him to trip the other. "Looks like he can fight," the student with the damaged wrist commented. The student with the wooden plank on the ground dropped his weapon and charged forward in an attempt to tackle Blake. Although the other tried to sidestep the charge, the Eaton High student managed to grab onto him. "Now!" The other 3 Eaton High students surrounded him. The wooden plank had already been picked up, and the 2 with the planks were about to take a swing, while the third one made sure to cut off any way of escape. "I'm just going to have to take this hit," Blake thought as he had to decide between getting rid of the student holding on to him or protecting himself. When the planks came down, they were stopped dead, inches from his face. Blake could see the green-haired boy who had been injured holding on to both. Blood was still dripping from his mouth, from a cut on the inside of his cheek. "That freaking hurt," Gary shouted as his heart rate was starting to increase. It never hurts knowing as much as you can about your enemy. From the sounds of it, you won't have any problem fighting against your former schoolmates. Eaton High will be the first opponent in the underground tag team tournament in around a week's time. Kai answered in his question. The Eaton High students who had come to the park were all members of the rugby team, which meant they were used to bashing into walls of muscles. Strength and speed were both key factors in sport to take down an opponent, but looking at Gary, he had neither on his side. As such, it was all the more surprising to see him hold onto both planks with a single hand. The 2 students from Eaton High had struggle written all over their faces as they attempted to yank their makeshift weapons free. The injured teenager merely tightened his grip until a snapping sound was heard. The 2 Eaton High boys stumbled a few steps back, still holding onto the planks. Looking down, they could see why they suddenly felt that much lighter. One end of them had been ripped off. They're still in his hand. Can a normal human even have such a grip strength? The next second, another student slammed a wooden plank against the back of Gary's head, snapping it in place and causing him to fall back to his knees. These Eaton High guys are ruthless. How can they not even hesitate to hit his head? Aren't they afraid they might accidentally kill him? All of that for a stupid match, Blake thought to himself as he was ready to help Gary. Yet before he could even reach their position, Gary had already recovered and threw a punch back. The student managed to block in time, raising his forearms, but the next second he found himself looking at the sky. What the? Is this some sort of joke? Did Gary set this up somehow? Or how is he able to knock a guy twice his size? Has he been holding back all the time? No. Could it be that he is one of us as well? Still, the main concern for Blake was the blood that was dripping down his classmate's head. The athlete was surprised the other was still standing after such a hit. He might be okay for now, while the adrenaline was pumping in his body, but once it was over, it would hurt like hell. They had to deal with those guys before that happened. Right now, Gary was dealing with the first 2 that had arrived, leaving Blake with the other 2. This was a number that he could easily deal with. When one of the Eton High students came rushing forward, pulling his arm back to throw a fist, Blake simply threw out a quick jab, hitting the student right in the face, almost lifting his legs off the ground. If you charge forward like that, it's going to hurt a lot more when someone hits you. Now it was time to deal with his buddy, but as Blake turned his head around, he only saw the other Eton High student's back. He had actually run off, abandoning his comrade. Guess they're not really the loyal bunch. Turning around, he was ready to help Gary. His chin nearly dropped to the ground as he saw the other two already on the ground. Still, his classmate didn't look good. He was huffing and panting with a hunchback, his hands by his side, looking like some type of weird beast. However, all the other three students had been beaten, rolling around the floor in pain. Damn, those guys' strength were similar to mine, even after I've used charging hard. Gary thought, I guess this shows how weak my original body is. Maybe I should have considered it some before putting my stat point into energy after that level up. And I'm not the best fighter. It's one thing knowing what to do, but another knowing how to do it. I was getting hit too much, and now my energy is low having to heal all these wounds. Hey, Gary, we need to get you checked out at a hospital, Blake said, rushing over. Emergency healing in progress. Energy will be consumed. Energy has been used up. Healing unable to complete. Eat more meat to restore energy points. During the fight, Gary had seen this a few times already, and now the system was healing the rest of his wounds until it had stopped. As long as he got some food, he would definitely be fine after this fight, and was worried the hospital could find something out. Don't worry about me. I'm tougher than I look, Gary shouted, already running off. Just look after yourself. You're the ace of the team, not me. Blake wanted to give chase, but Gary was faster than he should be, even if this was still the adrenaline. Unsure where the other teenager actually lived, Blake decided to just check up on him tomorrow. Looking around him, Blake looked at the sorry state of the Eton High students. He was able to take 3 giants like this down? He's a bit different. Blake smiled. When the healing was complete, the first thing Gary did was head to a shop to purchase more meat. There were 2 reasons for this. The first was the fact that whenever he could, he wanted his energy bar to be at a 100%. He never knew when the underdogs or something like what had just happened would occur, and he needed to be at full strength if a fight was to break out. The second was because he needed to complete his daily quests. I need to get stronger as quickly as possible, and leveling up seems to be the easiest way. After replenishing his energy, Gary headed to the gym once more. Usually, after school, Gary would head to the underdogs to complete his transporter duties. His mother was used to him coming home a little late, so it was no problem. During the session at the gym, Gary was able to lift weights easier than the time before. His muscles weren't sore either. What Gary didn't know was that usually beginners would suffer from extreme muscle soreness the next few days after weight training, but Gary experienced no such thing. The muscle fibers in his body were breaking down and healing at an incredible rate. Far faster than anyone could, even if they were to take enhancing supplements. Congratulations! Your body is seeing benefits of working out. Strength +1. So my stats can actually improve without needing me to level up. Looks like using that stat point on energy might have been the right choice after all. My strength was only at 4, which I'm guessing is still low. I wonder how long it will take me to gain the next one. The best thing about the skill charging heart was it doubled all of his stats for a certain amount of time period. So increasing his natural stats like so would be extremely beneficial. Strength 5, Dexterity 3, Endurance 8. Looking at the stats, Gary wondered what he could do to improve his dexterity since it was the lowest of the 3. Perhaps asking professional fighters of sorts or someone who knew what they were doing would help. As for endurance, he could only think of one thing for that, getting hit more, which he wasn't looking forward to. No matter what, though, he needed to improve all of these things through leveling up or his natural strength, and he had come up with the best solution to do both at the same time. I don't know when I'll be found by the underdogs or have to fight in that underground fighting area again, but if I want to live and protect my family, then I need to get stronger. The next day, Gary woke up and was heading to school as he did every day. After going home, he hadn't received any text from Kai. On the one hand, he was glad not having to fight after his earlier scuffle, On the other hand, the upperclassman was currently his only way to gain any cash. Should I just go and approach him instead? I don't really want to come off as needy. Then again, will it make any difference? He already has me by my balls. When arriving at school, Tom greeted him as normal and asked him 100 questions about how he was feeling and more. Of course, Gary replied he was feeling fine and told him the events of what happened yesterday. They're seriously going that far just because of some stupid high school sports event. I really don't understand people, Tom said, shaking his head. Anyway, that's 2 reasons why you should leave the rugby team now. Let's tell Mr. Root today during club practice. You can still play rugby, just not be part of the team. Don't worry, I won't be going to rugby practice today. Gary replied, I need to go to another club instead. When school ended, Blake was out on the rugby field, looking for Gary, but he never turned up. Where is that damned little broccoli head? I've already told him that we have a game coming up soon. Does he want to set a record for fastest player to be kicked off the team? Mr. Root shouted. Coach Root, me and Gary ran into some kids from Eaton High yesterday. Blake reported. They wanted to jump me, but he was unlucky enough to get involved. I assume he must still be recovering from that. Looking at Blake's knuckles, Mr. Root didn't need any more proof. Despite his rough appearance and his tendency to yell at his students, he nevertheless cared about their well-being. Unfortunately, he knew about the special relationship Eaton High enjoyed, which meant that there was nothing he could do about it. All right, I'll let him off with this once, but make sure to tell him this is an exception. I don't need him getting a big head and think he'll get any special treatment. As for the rest of you, let this be a lesson. Although they went for Blake yesterday, they might go after one of you as well. Make sure to go home in pairs. Mr. Root ordered. Hang on, so you bailed on rugby practice to come here? Be honest with me. Has becoming a werewolf made you lose your mind? This might be even worse than rugby. Tom whispered angrily, trying to appeal to his best friend as he followed him to the front of the school gym. The 2 friends could already hear the sounds of chanting from the outside. Inside, there were around a dozen students in white robes, all in sync performing a set of moves. Off to the side, there were several students that currently sat down, one of them being XIN. When the teacher noticed the newcomers, he asked, Oh, are you guys interested in the karate club? Gary clenched his fist and shook his head. I'm here to fight. At the beginning, Gary's daily quest had rewarded him with 10 EXP each. Unfortunately, now that his system classified him as level 2, each quest was only paying out half that amount. With the requirement to reach the next level having already doubled, it didn't take a math genius to understand that it would take a long time for him to progress by only relying on this method to accrue EXP. Nevertheless, this didn't mean that Gary intended to stop working out anytime soon. After all, right now, it was the only reliable method for him to increase his strength without any of the stat points he appeared to be getting for a level up. During his brief time with the system, Gary had actually gained the most EXP after fighting against others like the Eaton High students. Although he had yet to confirm his suspicion, he strongly believed that it might also be an effective way to gain other stats like endurance. Unwilling to go out and look for trouble in the streets, his conjecture had eventually led Gary to just challenge the martial arts clubs in his own school. The teacher of the karate club was an aged man whose arms were folded after hearing Gary's declaration. I like your spirit, kid, but things don't work like they do in movies. This is a school club. I can't just let anyone barge in here and allow them to fight my students. The teacher explained in a calm tone. Tom was very pleased that this teacher seemed reasonable and hadn't just outright accepted his buddy's crazy request. Now, he would just have to pull Gary out of the gym. Unfortunately, just when he was about to grab his friend by the arm, Tom saw a strange look in Gary's eyes. Why does he have that look again? Tom felt himself shaking. Everything in his body was telling him that it was a body idea to touch Gary right now. Unsure what it was, he listened to this feeling and took a step back. Hearing the teacher's response, Gary smiled. I just wanted to know if karate was worth learning these days. Gary said, these days, altered fights are being shown all over the internet and on TV. Everyone knows that the best fighters are those who don't just rely on their altered forms, but incorporate martial arts in their fighting style. However, despite being a huge fan, I have never seen a single one of the top altered fighters use karate. From Gary's experience, sport teachers, even more so combat teachers, took great pride in the martial arts they had learned for years. The black belt was proof that his teacher must have spent countless hours honing his skills, and Gary couldn't imagine that he would just let it slide, that he had basically called his craft useless. And that made you think it might not be worth your time and effort? Very well. Stephen, please help our enthusiastic friend find a GI in his size. The teacher instructed. Immediately, a student with a green belt stepped forward. Stephen had short hair similar to Tom's, and he was a little larger than Tom and Gary, yet not as big as rugby players like Gil and Barry. While Stephen and Gary had disappeared into the changing rooms, the other students had quickly laid out mats on the floor, creating an impromptu arena for the two boys to fight in. Not long after, the two combatants came out. Gary was now also in the white uniform, just like everyone else. He and Stephen both had headgear on, as well as shin guards to protect their legs, and finally a large cover on the front of their stomach. This entire set of protection gear only made it harder for Gary to move in, but even he understood that there was no way the teacher would let them fight without them. I shouldn't be surprised. This isn't a street fight. Not everyone can heal as fast as me, so it's natural he wants to keep us safe. I just hope it still counts as a fight like this. Gary worried as he took position on his side of the ring. Fortunately, the system promptly answered his desire. New quest received. Honorable fight. You are complying with your werewolf instincts and have sought out a mighty opponent. You have initiated a fight against a karateka, green belt. Win the match. Quest reward, 120 EXP. This counts as complying with my werewolf instincts. When I fought the other guy before, I was scared, but this time I feel a little excited. Gary analyzed. This method appeared to work even better than Gary could have ever hoped for. As long as he managed to win this fight, he would gain exactly enough EXP to reach level 3, allowing him to improve his stats even further. A hands-on demonstration should be the fastest way for you to get a feel for karate. Don't worry, Stephen here should be capable enough to teach you a lesson without hurting you too badly. The fight will end when one of you gives up. If either one of you steps off the mats, stop what you're doing and restart at the center. Most importantly, this is a friendly spar, so neither one of you is to aim at your opponent's face or their groin. Do you both understand? The teacher asked. The two of them nodded while the other students sat down around the mats, waiting for the match to begin. This was far more interesting than their usual training. As for Tom, he wasn't sure what to do. It seemed far too late to play everything off as a joke. Say, isn't your friend part of the rugby club? What's he doing here? A voice asked. When Tom turned around, he recognized the girl as XIN from their class. Well, let's just say not everyone was too keen about Mr. Root's decision to let Gary join the rugby club. He's been harassed by them, so he planned to get better at fighting. Tom made up an explanation which wasn't too far off the truth. Okay, but it looks like your friend just exchanged one bully for another. If he had asked normally, I'm sure Mr. Fong would have gladly taken him in, but now he's in for a beating. Stephen used to be the strongest member in this club, XIN pointed out, just in time for Mr. Fong to wave a flag, signaling the start of the match. I'm more afraid that Gary might not be able to hold back. Tom muttered to himself. As soon as the match began, Gary immediately activated his skill. Charging Heart, -10 energy. All of his stats immediately doubled. His strength rose to 10, while his endurance was now at a 16, but his dexterity was still slow, even though doubled at 6, making his slow speed regular. Even at this level, he will probably be too fast for me, but he's a lot smaller than the guy I fought in the underground tournament. With all this gear on, I can probably afford to trade punches. Gary thought. Once Gary entered into his range, Stephen swung using the full strength of his body and hips to connect his roundhouse kick with the arrogant newcomer. As the bigger and more confident guy, he expected Gary to fall, but as his foot connected, his opponent remained on the ground. Thanks to the armor and the increased endurance, the kick felt like just a light shove to Gary. Aware that he was unlikely to get a second opening, he, as the challenger, made use of his opponent's momentary confusion and used a punch, imitating his favorite fighter Kirk. He started his motions bending slightly. With all his strength, he sprung up using the strength of his legs to deliver a heavy punch, putting his weight behind the attack. His fist connected with a large cover over his stomach. Despite the protection gear, Stephen felt the wind get knocked out from him. The force behind the attack was far stronger than someone Gary's size should have had. Before the green belt could recover, Gary was already holding onto his opponent's shoulder, imitating Inu's actions by pulling Stephen forward, kneeing him in the stomach. As Gary stood above him, it was clear to everyone that Stephen had lost the match. Quest reward, 120 EXP. Congratulations, you have now reached level 3. The stat point has been granted. This guy, he isn't getting back up. I thought he would be like those Eaton High kids. I guess he's not really used to taking a beating. Still, just because I can beat up some of my age doesn't mean I would fare well against those gangsters. And I know from watching those underground fights that there are people better than this. Mr. Fong quickly rushed over to Stephen, even forgetting to declare the fight to be over, too worried about his pupil's well-being. It appeared as if he had misjudged Gary. At first, he had believed him to just be a naive kid, but judging from his fighting style, although it was rough, he was someone who had fought before. His own student had been at a complete disadvantage. Stephen was used to fighting competitions. As such, he had stayed overly cautious about not losing any points, try his best to show off his skills, while the only thing on Gary's mind had been winning the fight. He beat Stephen, and it was only in 2 hits. It looked like he got winded from the first punch. Even with all the armor, that punch must have been strong. I think Stephen was playing it too safe. He should have gone for a kick to the head. The students continued to murmur between themselves. What should I do with him? If that kid leaves now, he will look down on karate, but I can't just face him myself. An adult beating up a kid would prove nothing to him. The karate teacher thought. It was then that another one stood up from the sitting students. Mr. Fong, I would like to fight him next. A voice said. W, what are you doing? Tom asked, wondering why Xin, who had been by his side mere seconds ago, had just volunteered to fight. Well, it would be pointless for your friend to fight someone weaker than Stephen, wouldn't it? Who do you think pushed Stephen down to being the second strongest in this club? Xin asked Tom with a smirk. After defeating Stephen, Gary was fully focused on one thing, his system. So much so that he remained blissfully unaware of what was going around him at the moment. How the other contestants stared at him with a mix of admiration and hostility and the mixed emotion on Mr. Fong's face. When reaching level 2, he had placed the free stat point into his energy stat, increasing it by 10 points. Right now, he was carefully contemplating in which category to place the next point. Putting it into strength seems like a waste if I can just increase it by going to the gym. I still have to verify whether getting beat up is a viable method to increase endurance, and I have no idea about how to increase dexterity manually yet. However, I'm sure there are ways. On the other hand, I doubt I can increase energy or health on my own. So which one should I choose? Getting 10 more points in health might not be a bad idea. Reaching 0 HP can't be good, so I should avoid it ever falling that low. Then again, energy seems overly useful. Not only is it used for healing, but in the future, I'll most likely have access to more skills like charging heart. With a bigger pool, I could use them more often. When Gary returned to the present, he noticed that a girl was standing opposite him, wearing the same type of protective gear like Stephen and him. He had only taken a glance before he went back to his status screen, but he quickly lifted his head to look at the girl again. Wait a second, you... Gary mumbled like a fool, pointing at her with his finger, yet unable to finish his sentence. You came here looking for a fight, right? Don't tell me that you already got your fill just from that match. You hardly did anything. Xin spoke as she lifted her hand and gestured for Gary to come at her. It was something that the spectators had only ever seen done in the movies. If they were to attempt such a thing, most would probably have died from embarrassment on the inside. However, for some reason, the way Xin spoke, the way she acted, was filled with confidence, giving her actions such a natural feel that nobody dared to point out. Gary started to look towards Mr. Fong, hoping he would step in and at least tell her to back down from the fight. After all, he had just defeated Stephen so easily, who the teacher had been quite confident in. However, he just stood to the side, taking care of Steven, who seemed to have just recovered. Is he really going to allow this fight to happen? But she's a girl, Gary thought. It wasn't that he thought girls were weak or anything like that, but despite Gary being on the smaller side, Xian had a more petite frame than him. What's more, he knew he carried an unfair advantage. When using charging hard, he had the strength of a person twice his size. Most importantly, the last person Gary wanted to hit was his crush. Damn it, I can't allow Gary to continue with this fight. If she gets him in any type of locking position and puts his head closer to her chest, the guy is guaranteed to turn on the spot. Tom worried, racking his brain to figure a way out for his friend. I'm sorry, I'm just worried that I might hurt you. I know this might sound a bit old-fashioned, but I really don't think I can hit you. Gary apologized while making sure to bow down. The teenager wasn't doing this out of respect. He just wanted to cover his face, which he feared to be beet red. Huh. Mr. Fong let out a loud laugh. Boy, through this thick armor, you won't be hurting anyone. That's assuming you'll actually manage to hit the young Mrs. Clove. I can tell that you have fought a few times outside, but in martial arts, you should never discriminate against your opponent. You never know just how deadly someone with a weapon might be, even if that weapon happens to be one's own body. Gary understood what Mr. Fong was saying, and it was never his intention to discriminate against anyone. Heck, if a girl chased after him with a knife or went after his family members' lives, he was a firm believer of true gender equality. It was just, every time he looked at this girl in particular, his heart would beat rapidly, which in his case might lead to more severe consequences than him pitching a tent. There's no way he can fight, Tom announced, as he suddenly looked up. Everyone looked over at him, confused why he had gotten involved as well. Xin, he can't fight you because he likes you. Tom practically yelled out the last part. The whole hall was dead silent, including Xin herself. Tom, what the hell are you doing? Why are you confessing to her on my behalf? Gary was screaming in his head at this absurdity, while simultaneously wishing for the ground to open up and swallow him whole. Just like everyone else, he was speechless, and all he could see was the system displaying his heartbeat, which was rising dangerously close to the 150 BPM mark. At this rate, I won't even need to use charging hard. Oh, so it's like that? Xin eventually broke the silence as she placed her hand on her chin. Well, I'm flattered, I guess. I'm not quite sure how to feel right now. I've just transferred here, so all I know about you is your performance during rugby practice and when you were fighting Steven. Oh, and that little red sea of sick you made. Clenching his fists, Gary just wanted to run away from this entire situation. If he had known that it would turn into such a giant mess, he would have never challenged this stupid club. At least he was slightly happy that she hadn't outright rejected him, although he hadn't missed the fact that she hadn't exactly accepted his feelings for her either. I'm sorry, I just can't, Gary mumbled as he began to take off his protective headgear, keeping eye contact to the floor, too embarrassed to look up. Seeing this, Xin felt a little annoyed, but not as much as Mr. Fong. Gary had been the one who had started this little fighting session, yet now he was going to give up there? While the teacher was still looking for a reason to make him stay, Xin had just come up with a plan. Hey, wait, Xin called out. Is it true what your friend said? About you liking me? Gary wasn't quite sure how to answer this. Just as Xin had pointed out, they hadn't known each other for long, or at all, actually. Yeah, sorry that someone like me likes you. Gary answered eventually, mustering his courage to look up. How about we go on a date? Xin suggested. I can't just promise you to become a girlfriend, but if you can beat me in a match, then we can at least go out once. What do you say? Huh? Everyone inside the hall was baffled. Xin was a beautiful girl, so some of the karate club members had tried to ask her out when she had joined. She had instantly refused all but one of them. When Steven had tried his luck, Xin had told him that she would consider it before requesting a match against him. Unsurprisingly, that event had cemented his position as second strongest. I'll only go out with someone stronger than me, Xin proclaimed with a big smile. New quest received. Win the date. The girl of your dreams has challenged you to a fight. Swoop her off her feet and into your arms, lover boy. Quest reward. Instant level up, plus a date. What the hell is wrong with this system? Gary thought. Gary had been sure that his mind had been made up to get out of the hall as fast as his legs would allow him. Heck, he had even seriously considered using charging heart to get out faster, and he had been convinced that nothing would be able to change that. Yet two things had just made a match against Xion extremely tempting. For one, there was the quest that he had just received. As silly as the quest description was, the reward was clear enough. If he could beat her, he would benefit from an instant level up. This system is full of surprises. The fight against that Steven guy had already granted me far more EXP than any other, but it had still been a flat amount. So why is it different now? The system seems to function similar to a game, and they usually reward you based on the difficulty of a task. So, is it saying that fighting against Xion would really be that much harder? But what about Steven? He was weaker than those other guys. In all honesty, Gary didn't know if the system really worked like a game, so he could only look at the facts that he had in front of him. Beating Xion would result in him instantly reaching level 4, meaning he would get yet another free stat point to use as he wished. However, the second reason, which if he was being honest, was far more enticing, was that beating her meant she would go out with him. That possibility alone resulted in his mind going haywire once more. A date? Shit. I've never been on an actual date before. Where'd we go? To the movies? Mini golf? A restaurant? But all those things cost money. Maybe I can just take her for a walk in the park. Yeah, that sounds good. There's a river there as well. If someone attacks us like when I was with Blake and she gets pushed into the river and maybe she can't swim, then maybe I could jump in and... So, are we doing this or not? Xion asked after Gary had stopped walking. He remained standing there, which she took as a good sign. She was sure he just needed a little more push. Soon, the hall echoed with a chuckle, and it was coming from none other than Gary. I say, I'm going to save your life. Gary turned around, madness in his eyes as he pointed towards her. Let's fight. With so many strange things happening one after the other, the students didn't even question Gary's strange response. They were just pleased that they were about to witness another spectacle instead of doing their boring, repetitive drills. Once again, the only who couldn't share their enthusiasm was Tom, who was on the sideline biting his fingernails. Calm down, Tom, and check where the exits are. You'll need to grab Gary in case he shows any signs of turning. Now that he thought about it, he had never seen Gary do anything werewolf-like, apart from his wild anger. Thinking about this calmed his heart a little. He might be just an angry wolf on the inside. Mr. Fong was ready. Steven was back to his usual self, and both fighters were in their positions. Ready, go. The fight had started, and Gary's heart hadn't settled yet. His active skill charging heart had worn off, but he was wondering with his heart the way it was now. Maybe he wouldn't need to activate the skill. It was then that he strangely saw that Xion was the one that had charged first. She ran in and suddenly jumped in the air, spinning her body. He saw her back and soon after her whole leg. Seeing this at the last second, Gary tilted his head back. His movements were twice as slow without the skill charging heart, allowing him to narrowly miss her foot, and he soon repositioned himself by moving to one of the corners of the mat. How fast was that kick? And a spinning kick. If she had hit me with that, I have a feeling my head would have gone flying off. Is she trying to kill me? Gary wondered as he felt something tickling from his nose. He tried to sniff it up, but it didn't work, and when looking down, he could see blood on the floor. The back of her heel had lightly grazed the tip of his nose. Looks like you're a little slower, and I guess if you don't get the first hit, you're useless. Xion shrugged her shoulders. I expected more from you for some reason. Haha, did you see him running away? Don't go in the corner. Come on, why don't you just use your brute strength like before? Because he knows he's going to get knocked out. The students mocked and laughed, wanting one of their own to win. Shit, was I going easy on her because I didn't want to hurt her, but looks like I can't hold back. Gary thought. Skill activated charging heart. All stats have temporarily been doubled. Dash 10 energy points. Placing his hand on his chest, Gary could once again feel his heart thumping so loud it felt like it was going to jump from his throat. Although nothing seemed to change from the outside, Exon, who was in the fight, quickly got into a fighting stance again, feeling a change. This is what I wanted, Xion mumbled. Now it was Gary's turn, and he decided to charge in just as he did against Steven. I'll just take the hit. I took a hit from that large blob guy and was still standing, so taking a hit from someone like this is no problem at all. Gary thought as he gritted onto his teeth, expecting what was to come. Xian stayed firm, her leg ready, and judged the distance. Then when Gary was within her zone, she spun her body once again and let out a kick with the heel of her foot, aiming towards the head. Gary knew that he was still too slow, even with a charging heart, to react to the kick after seeing the first one, but he was confident in his recovery skills. He could see the kick and attempted to lift his hands up, but even they were too slow, and eventually the heel had hit him right in the head underneath the ear. An immense pain was felt, and his head flung to the side. The others even looked away. The kick had landed so solid, but Gary gritted his teeth, carried on moving, pushing through, and moved forward again. I just have to grab her, huh? Why is she moving away? Gary thought, as the image of Xian started to spin as if one was dizzy. The next thing Gary knew, he was falling to his side and was running straight forward into the crowd of people who were sitting down. Gary had crashed into the other students and had fallen off the mats. It was a perfect strike behind the ear. Tom noticed. His whole head must be spinning at that moment. That's why he fell over. Years of watching altered fights, Tom knew quite a bit about fighting. As for Xian, the one who had delivered the blow, she was shocked herself. I didn't think he would take the kick head on like that. I thought he had a better plan. I didn't hold back either. How did he do it? Why is he still standing? She was amazed that Gary was even still able to walk forward and look his way. She could see him getting up, but soon falling back over. Eventually, after getting up the third time, Gary was up on his feet, all okay again. It was the quickest she had seen someone recover. Reset, Mr. Fong said, with a big grin on his face. He knew as a teacher he shouldn't be smiling at something like this, but he just couldn't help himself. Gary was ready for round 2, to reset the match and fight again. However, he had received a message from the system at that point. Quest failed. You are no longer able to complete this quest. Since becoming a werewolf and obtaining the system, it was Gary's first loss and first quest failure. Club activities had ended for the day, and for the first time in a while, Tom and Gary had the chance to walk back together. The last couple of days, Gary had just rushed home, claiming he had something important to do. Tom had known that he had to be hiding something, but only recently did he find out that it was due to his part-time job as a delivery person. Then the other day, Blake had gone home with him for some reason. Now, it was just them two, and since they didn't exactly live in the same area, the time they would walk together would be short. Tom was hoping to crack a few jokes about what had just happened, how his best friend had seemingly lost the girl he had fallen for. But the whole way, since they had left the club room, Gary hadn't said a word. The silence was killing Tom, and he just couldn't leave his best friend like this. Since they were about to enter one of the rougher areas, where Gary lived, they would part ways soon. If he wanted to say something, he would have to do it now. Hey man, don't let it get to you. Apparently, she was the strongest person in the whole club. I don't think losing against her is anything to be ashamed of. Who knows, if you learn to get better and stronger and control your werewolf powers, maybe you can even beat her next time and get that date. Tom claimed enthusiastically, but in his mind, all he could see were images of his friend transforming in the middle of the fight, and he soon shook his head to get rid of that thought. It's not just that I lost, Gary eventually mumbled out, but soon went quiet because he knew it was impossible to explain to Tom. Losing to Xian, someone who weighed far less than him, and someone his age, meant that if the underdogs or anyone else were to ever find out where he or his family lived, they could easily beat him. Not just the underdogs, but other gangs had members that were extremely good at fighting. Different martial arts was just their basis. At the end of the day, the underdogs also had Kirk, an altered who had won the altered rookie championship. If he was ever sent to deal with Gary's family, could he even last a few seconds with the way he was at the moment? Normally, Tom should have left a while ago to head in the other direction, but he couldn't leave him like this with the way his friend was. As he looked down the street, he could see a red-colored gang in the area walking around. The second they met eyes, Tom looked away. The red gang are in this area as well now. Tom whispered to Gary, I guess the underdogs aren't in complete control of this area then. This should be a good thing for you, for the area. You really think I'll be happy about the fact that more gangs are roaming around the place where I live? Gary scoffed. It's good because it means the underdogs have their own problems to deal with, and they won't ruin this place further, but the black color gang and the red color gang have been fighting in this area more frequently. Thankfully, the main gangs haven't gotten involved yet, but let's just say even walking to school is getting tough. Thinking about this, Gary remembered the girl he had seen. He still wondered why the black colored gang had attempted to abduct her so openly. Even stranger was that she seemed to be somehow related to Kai, yet he had never mentioned her to him. Oh, that's right, I almost forgot to tell you. Tom face-bombed as he suddenly remembered something in regards to gangs. The other day I decided to go out to the shop. It was pretty late, and these guys followed me. Suddenly, Gary was deeply concerned about his friend. The story wasn't starting well, but when looking at Tom, he could see he had no injuries on his body and was relieved. This didn't go unnoticed, and Tom was happy to see that Gary still cared for him. I'm all right. What I was going to say was this guy came out of nowhere, all dressed in black, and beat them all up. Honestly, it was pretty badass. Hey, maybe if you had a teacher like that guy, something like what happened earlier wouldn't have happened. Tom wanted to tease his friend, but he quickly covered his mouth, realizing that he had just poked a hornet's nest. Not a bad idea, Gary mumbled. So who do you think he was, a gangster boss out for a walk or something? No, he didn't really look like one. Tom looked around at the gang members in the area they were currently in. The man that he met just didn't seem to fit in with the others. Come to think of it, he might have been an altered. That might explain his large frame, and usually they have superhuman bodies even without transforming. Alternatively, he could have been an altered hunter. Altered hunter, huh? I guess even the altered have things they need to worry about. Gary commented. Eventually, Tom couldn't venture in the other side of town too far. He needed to go home and mention this to Gary. Realizing how far Tom had accompanied him, Gary decided to walk him back until he was in a safer area, since he might not be as lucky to meet such a mysterious stranger a second time. It was getting pretty late, around 6 p.m., which was when the sun was starting to set, and more troubled people would roam the streets. Tom was concerned about this, but Gary reminded him that he wasn't a regular person anymore and reassured him by saying he would be going straight home. However, pulling up his hood, Gary got his phone out and sent a text to his mother and sister. I'm at Tom's and will be coming home late tonight. Gary had no intention of going home yet, and he was ready to cause a bit of chaos. When XIN left the karate club, she was showered with praises from the other members for doing a good job in humiliating Gary. However, for her, she felt like the fight wasn't over yet. Her opponent hadn't been knocked out and was still well enough to fight again. Yet for some reason, her opponent had just left having received the first blow. Before she left to make her way home, Mr. Fong had stopped to have a word with her. XIN, I'll ask you again, are you sure you don't want to join the winter tournament? If you do well, it's a good chance for you to get noticed. With your talent, and in a world we live in like today, you could easily get noticed, and please, Mr. Fong, I know you mean well, but I really can't. XIN replied. Besides, I'm not the one with talent in my family. With the conversation over, XIN quickly left the club to head home, while Mr. Fong was left thinking that a wasted opportunity was slipping right in front of him. He could tell that something was up. He had never seen any student with such a pained look before, turning such an offer down. When leaving the club, XIN saw a group of girls looking towards her. They soon looked away and started whispering to each other, still making glances once in a while. Damn it, did I mess with the wrong girl like Dad was worried about? But it was an accident. It might be good if I go and apologize to her tomorrow. Crap, I'm not really good at these things. XIN thought. Eventually, leaving the school gates, she took a turn, and a black-colored car was waiting for her. Before XIN could even open the door, the driver had gotten out of the car and opened the door for her. Please, miss, the driver said. XIN had gotten into the car with tinted black windows and had started her drive home. All of this was done because XIN was the mayor's daughter, the mayor of a Tier 3 city. Usually, such an important figure of a town or city would send their family for schooling in a higher tier city. The reason, because to get into the position the mayor was in today, it most likely meant that the mayor had a connection to one of the big gangs in the area, making a mayor's family an easy target. At the same time, this also meant that XIN was protected in more ways than one. However, she was sick and tired of her old life. Not being able to go anywhere freely, having to be careful who she talked to, and always being guarded at all times. It was hard for her to even make friends due to the way she lived. However, this year she had managed to get her father to relax a little by making a deal with him. I just have to get through this year and prove to him that everything will be okay. I'll say sorry to Tiffany tomorrow, and I'll make sure everything is all right. But what about that Gary guy? Will I have to worry about him? She thought, thinking about the look on his face. She also found it strange that someone who was inexperienced in fighting would suddenly ask to fight trained fighters like that. She honestly didn't like people like Gary, those that had been blessed with a good body and strength, beating on those that had trained for years. Well, his friend did say he liked me, so I don't think he will be causing any problems. Eventually, the vehicle had arrived in a more private area of the town. It was driving through what looked like woodlands and had reached a large black gate. Standing outside, there were those that looked like guards wearing suits. However, if one was to look closer, they could see that they weren't just any guards. They had tattoos running up their necks, and some even had piercings. These were gangsters that had been lent to the mayor for protection. In a way, they worked as a bigger deterrent than bodyguards for other gangs. The house was in sight. It was quite a large 6-bedroom house with a bathroom in every room. This would be a luxury for anyone living in a Tier 3 city. In the first place, not even a mayor of a small town like this one would have been able to live in a place like this. Not unless to get into the position they were in and had taken a few bribes here and there, but she knew her dad wasn't a bad person. It is just how the way the world works. XIN repeated in her mind. Unfortunately, that was the only way to move up in the current world. Still, because she hadn't been here long, it was hard to call this foreign place home. That was until she had entered the house and heard a certain voice. "Hey, is the troublemaker back?" A voice said, coming from the kitchen. XIN quickly ran in and went inside to see her mother and the one whose voice she had heard coming through the doors. Her brother. "Jaden, you're here. Didn't you say you would be busy shooting at this time?" XIN asked. Like XIN herself, her brother was quite the pretty boy, having clear skin and a quite chiseled look, yet feminine as well. His eyes were so naturally dark that it looked like he wore eyeliner. However, it was just his dark eyelashes. His body was also what bodybuilders would strive for, but that was mostly due to his job. "Well, one of my appointments got canceled, so I decided to head back home early." Jaden answered. He could see a glow in XIN's eyes, leaving him to let out a big sigh. "Sometimes I don't think you're happy to see me because of me." "Fine. Let me finish here, and we can go for a round," Jaden said, getting up from his seat. The two of them moved and headed outside. On the large piece of land where their house lay, there was an annex, and inside it was set up with gym equipment, such as punching bags and dolls, and more martial arts equipment. "Wow, this place looks nearly as nice as the gym I train at," Jaden complimented. He was waiting to hear XIN say something, but could just see her already putting on protective gear. Shaking his head, he knew he had already lost to the fighting-obsessed maniac. The two had gotten into position, and it was time. XIN started as she charged forward, leaping up in the air and spun, delivering a kick to the head. She soon saw Jaden lean back and narrowly avoid it. It missed, just like it did against Gary, but this is different, XIN thought. She was right. The difference was Jaden had narrowly avoided it on purpose to not use too much energy, and if he wanted to, it would allow him the timing to attack himself. The kicks continued with a few punches here and there, and Jaden avoided all of them. Once in a while he would throw a kick back, but it would just be a light tap, showing his sister he could have hurt her at any time. Eventually, getting frustrated, XIN went to try her strongest attack. She was ready, waited for the perfect time, and spun once again, hoping to hit her brother with the back of her heel, right behind the ear. She could feel it connect, but her brother was still standing with his arm covering the area. He then took a step forward, throwing her off balance and causing her to fall to the ground. Throwing out a punch to her face, he stopped an inch from her nose. "And that is definitely a defeat," Jaden said with a smile. "You really have improved a lot, and those kicks of yours are hard to deal with. Trust me," he said, massaging his arm, helping her up off the ground. He could tell Exine wasn't pleased. Usually his compliments would make her feel better, but it didn't look like it this time. "What's wrong?" Jaden asked. "Are my kicks really that strong? You're not just saying that to make me feel better, right?" Exine asked. "That's what you're upset about? That kick I blocked at the end. First of all, I'm 25 and your body still has room to grow," Jaden said. "Second of all, your brother is one of the top 50 fighters in the country. And to top that off, I'm an altered, so I have an unfair advantage. If you kicked anyone your age, be it boy or girl, they wouldn't be able to stand up again." Hearing her brother's words, she found it very hard to believe because that very kick he was talking about, there was a person who had stood up again. Maybe that boy is someone to look out for after all. Xian mumbled. Suddenly, she felt a heat coming from the corner of the room, and as she looked at Jaden, she could see the fire in his eyes. "What's this about a boy? Did he try touching you? You can tell me, right? You know the rule I and Dad set for you. If anyone wants to go out with you, they need to at least be strong enough to beat me." She knew about this rule, but she knew that was also impossible. There were only a few people in the country strong enough to beat her brother. That's why she had altered that rule slightly to herself, that they had to at least be stronger than her. Hopefully then it would be someone her brother would accept, but whether she would ever find a person or not was a different story altogether. "Will there be one today?" The message read on the phone. "Oh, he seems to be getting more impatient. I wonder if something happened to him." Kai mused as he read the message on his phone. At the very top, the name Green Fawn was displayed. "There is no need for you to ask me. I will notify you when I need you." Kai texted back and placed the phone back into his pocket as he continued on his way to a particular car park. The car park itself was quite large, 6 stories, yet it was empty. Although the night sky was out, it wasn't too late, yet there were no cars present at all. The reason why it was empty was because today was due to it being another day like before. It was a fight night, and the multiple gangs in the area had made sure that those that didn't need to know about it wouldn't stumble upon this place. "So tell me again, why didn't you invite that Green Fawn guy? Are you worried he might go crazy again?" Inu asked, having caught a glimpse of Gary's message on Kai's phone. The newest member of their yet-to-be-named gang was wearing the new uniform he had been given. The black overcoat with a golden trim and his matching trousers suited him surprisingly well. "Because it would be a bit much to invite our leader to such a small occasion," Kai answered with a smirk, not turning around. "Our leader? That green-haired guy that could barely fight is supposed to be our leader? Didn't know you had a sense of humor, but seriously tell me the real reason," Inu insisted. However, Kai didn't say another word, and just continued to move towards the car park. There were 2 guards up ahead who didn't look like they quite belonged there. Still, it was a perfect way to stop anyone nosy from snooping around. Inu, for a moment entertaining the possibility that Kai wasn't just pulling his leg, stopped in his tracks, making Marie, or Maya she liked to be called, nearly walk into him. At the last moment, she gracefully sidestepped him. "He really is not joking? I need to know what the hell I signed myself up for," Inu asked the girl, who just shook her head before following behind Kai. The 2 guards appeared to be adults in their late 20s or early 30s. They checked over Kai and his entourage briefly, yet didn't say anything else as the trio walked past them. Inside, the 3 could hear the sounds of several people cheering. Inu knew that once they went further in, he wouldn't be able to ask Kai as many questions, so he had to ask now. Fine. Let's say that kid is our leader. Then isn't that all the more reason to bring him along? Not to belittle him or anything, but he clearly isn't really used to these kinds of things, and some more fighting practice couldn't hurt either. The way he currently is, the leader of a gang could be said to be their most important person. In a way, they alone symbolized the prestige of their respective gang. Hence why in most cases it was the gang member with the most strength. Due to the No Lethal Weapons Act, individual strength was important these days. In cases of disagreement, when one side needed to convince another, the most forward way was to do it the good old-fashioned way. However, this wasn't always the case. Especially for established gangs, it wasn't rare to have a wise leader at the top, one who wasn't just a musclehead. In those cases, it would either be their right-hand man or those under him with the frightening strength that would ensure that others followed their command. Usually, those kinds of leaders had something special about them, a type of unique charisma that had allowed them to get trustworthy people to work under them in the first place. Inu had joined in the belief that Kai would be the latter type, which was why he was shocked to learn that Gary was supposed to be their leader. He didn't even fit the former type, so with him as their gang's representative, it was practically asking for trouble. The fighter could already foresee them getting picked on by other gangs. All right, seeing that you're asking out of concern for the new gang you've joined, I suppose I shouldn't keep you out of the loop. You see, in my opinion, there are certain qualities that distinguish a great leader from a good one. Kai replied, not slowing his steps. A great leader needs to have a reason to keep growing his territory. Putting it simply, they need ambition and hunger. At the moment, I'm testing that person's hunger since I want to see just how far he will go. If I'm right, then it's just a matter of time for Gary to start acting on his own. Once he does, it will be a perfect opportunity to find out just how ambitious he is. At this moment, the three could see several cars that had been parked in a way to make an arena. Crowds were cheering from behind them as a fight was already taking place. The first thing Ina noticed were certain students from Eton High. His fists tensed up as images of what happened before flashed through his head. He said that they will be our next opponent. I guess we were here to scout them today then. Inu thought, don't worry. I spoke up. With the amount of different prospect gangs, subdivisions, and colored gangs here, no one will be stupid enough to start a fight, so your body can stop shaking. I'm not scared, but angry, Inu replied with gritted teeth. I could take on any one of those backstabbing bastards on their own. They only beat me because they ganged up on me. The girl just smiled and lightly patted him on the back before she looked for a good spot to watch the ongoing fight. Meanwhile, Kai had been paying attention to something else. On top of one of the cars, a little behind the arena, there was a large digital board that had the names of today's fighting roster, as well as the betting odds. Strange, I was sure Billy Buster was meant to be fighting today. Kai thought. Given his fighting record, the gangs must have already tried to scout him. Were it not for his loss that day, I'm sure he would have gotten a serious offer. Was his pride hurt so badly that he wants to wait for people to forget, or did Gary actually manage to hurt him more than I thought? Kai wondered. At that very moment, Billy opened the fridge in his apartment complex. I'm so hungry, Billy thought as his eyes latched onto some raw lamb at the bottom of the fridge that had still yet to be cooked. Without even a moment's hesitation, his hand grabbed it, and before he knew what he was doing, he had started digging into it with his mouth ripping it apart. Eventually, when he was done with his meal, he let out a satisfied burp, scratching his neck, which showed a mark on his neck where he had been bitten. In the town of Slough, there was an unwritten rule concerning the area where Gary lived. When the sun went down, that was when the underworld came out to play. The colored gangs and more would roam the streets. If Gary hadn't told his mother he would be staying at Tom's, who lived in a more affluent area, then she would be worried out of her mind. He had also often lied about his parents dropping him off by their apartment as well. As a former transporter for the underdogs, Gary had needed to learn not only where their own territories were, but also what territories belonged to which color gang, as well as which areas were the most common fight spots. The knowledge that the entire town, except for a few key areas, had been divided in so many sub-areas which the gangs claimed for their own, had left quite the bitter aftertaste in his mouth. It had been vitally important to memorize the safest route, as it was rarely the most direct one. Gary often would have to go through a bunch of different territories to reach his destination. It was safe to say that he had been quite good at his job, which was why he had never failed a delivery until that day. At least I got this strange system out of this all, Gary thought to himself as he quickened his pace. He had his hood up, covering his green hair, not that it stood out among all the other punks that were currently out on the streets. After all, he had chosen that hair color for that reason specifically. Still, for what he was about to do, he needed to make sure that he wouldn't be recognizable. Using what money he had left, he bought a few cheap rags from the convenience store that were black in color. Leaving the store, he searched for an unoccupied alley and started to rip them up, then tied them around his arm and legs, covering them fully. Once he was done, Gary headed towards a certain area of town. It didn't take him long to find what he was looking for. The graffiti on the wall that had marked this area as belonging to the black color gang appeared to have just recently been tagged over with red paint. This was the same as claiming ownership over this area. Gary closed his eyes and concentrated on his ears. All his senses had been sharpened ever since he woke up with the werewolf system. Listening carefully, he could hear the sounds of some people talking amongst themselves. Although he was unable to hear exactly what they said, he did make out the sound of a spray can. Opening his eyes, he walked in the direction the sounds came from. It seems like luck is on my side tonight. But for the red color gang to have spread this far out into the black color gang's territory, and to do it so brazenly, surely they should know that the black color gang worked for the underdogs. Are they just brave, stupid, or do they actually have the backing of someone who is willing to go against Damien and his goons? Gary thought as he stepped out. Hey, this ain't your territory. Do you really think you should be doing that? Gary asked, his heart beating louder with every word he spoke. Just as he had heard, there were 3 of them, all wearing red colors. One of them was clearly holding a spray can in the midst of tagging yet another wall. But as for the others, Gary had no clue what type of weapons they might have on them. The 3 young adults looked at each other for a second and started to laugh. The one closest to Gary, who also happened to be the largest among the group, therefore most likely designated as the lookout, came at Gary. Let's get him. The man swung at Gary, sure that the height difference would play out in his favor, but the high schooler was able to duck the first punch. Luckily, I used Charging Heart as soon as I entered the alleyway. Were those gang members always so aggressive? Here I thought I would need to taunt them a bit more. Gary saw an opening, a chance to attack, so he quickly kicked the first person right in the stomach, using the tip of his toes to dig in. The man hurled over, and Gary mused that if he had gone in again, he could have finished off the first member, but instead he decided to turn around and run. I can't underestimate them, and I can't let them see my face clearly. There's 3 of them and only one of me. He reminded himself as he widened the distance, but at the same time made sure to allow the gang members to follow after him. Running away, the red-colored gang members were soon chasing after Gary. 3 members soon became 6, then 9. The first 3 hadn't exactly kept quiet, making others notice them and join the chase. The sheer number of them, which continued to grow, reassured Gary that he had made the right decision in choosing not to fight. If he had been caught up with the first 3, then there was a good chance the others would have joined and eventually outnumbered him. This morning, with Gary's brimming overconfidence after becoming a type of altered who had even won a fight in the arena, he would have decided to fight the 3 of them. After all, there was that one instance when he had managed to defeat 5 members of a colored gang. But after losing to Xian, he felt humbled. His crush had reminded him that one shouldn't judge someone by only their outer appearance. That guy, he's not fast, but he isn't slowing down. One of the red gang members huffed as they continued to chase. Gary couldn't deny that fact, not when his system had assigned him a mere 3 points of dexterity, which he figured was linked to his speed. Even after using Charging Heart, his running wasn't much faster than the average person's. Fortunately, he more than made up for that in the stamina department that he had already confirmed was linked to his energy bar. Eventually, Gary arrived at his destination, a park with an open platform. Using his sensitive ears, he could hear what he had been hoping for. I need help. Red Color Gang has come to fight us. Gary shouted out loud. It was only then that the dozen or so Red Color Gang members noticed that they had been following Gary all the way into an entirely different area, one that was under stricter control of the Black Colored Gang. A group of Black Colored Gang members that would regularly use the park as their hangout spot was already present and quickly surrounded the trespassers. New quest received. My enemy's enemy. Using your knowledge, you have caused quite the stir. You have instigated a turf war. Choose a side and make sure they win. Quest reward. 50 EXP per defeated person. There were around 10 of them in total, making the fight more or less even. The red members, seeing no situation out of this mess, decided to go ahead and fight. The 2 sides clashed, bringing out their weapons in the form of bike chains, pocket knives, and baseball bats. Some just used their fists, and those are the ones who knew how to fight a little better than others. As for Gary, he didn't just stay a bystander in all of this. He was also joining in, mostly because he needed to. For one, he needed not to blow his cover, and then there was also his quest reward. Nevertheless, Gary was sneaky enough to wait for the right chance before delivering the knockout blow to the weakened enemy. Were all of this a game, the gang members might complain about him essentially kill-stealing, but as it was, the other black color gang members just regarded him as another member. In this intense moment, they didn't care who got the last punch in. Yet for Gary, it was vitally important because the counter that had appeared would only go up when he would knock someone out. The fight didn't last more than a few minutes, and in the end, the black color gang had won. Huffing and panting, 3 of them were still standing, while 4 if one included Gary, while the rest had lost consciousness. Surprisingly, despite some of them having had pocket knives, nobody was bleeding badly apart from a few scratches. Quest reward, 450 EXP. Congratulations, you have now reached level 4. A stat point has been granted. 50 of 460 EXP. Seeing this, Gary was pleased that he now had 2 total stat points to allocate, since he had not yet allocated the previous one. It wasn't that he hadn't been able to decide what to use it for, but he had come to the realization that it was wiser to allow his body to naturally improve until it hit some sort of limit before he would start using them. Hey, you were quite skilled there, man. What group are you from? One of the black-colored gang members approached Gary from behind, who still had his face turned away. Unfortunately, as a transporter, Gary had only needed to know about the colored gang's territories, so he didn't know the ins and outs of the gangs. While he was racking his brain on how to get out of the situation, he heard another sound from the system. Optional quest received. Is also my enemy? The truth is you belong to neither of these gangs, and now you can come out on top. Defeat the remaining gang members. Quest reward, 50 EXP per defeated person. This system, although this new quest offered him the same rewards for the same type of work, Gary actually felt a bit conflicted. As the description had pointed out, he wasn't really a member of the black color gang. Yet these people had helped him out, and he had literally fought side by side with them just moments ago. Gary might be unable to lie his way out of the situation, but he could always just flee. I can't backstab them, Gary thought, but just as he was ready to get out of the park, someone let out a scream. Turning around, he could see that it had originated not too far from where he was. You should have stayed on your side, bastard. One of the black color gang members gleefully exclaimed as he whacked his baseball bat down on the back of one of the red color gang members who was unable to do anything about this sort of bullying. If that guy keeps hitting him like that, he might even kill him. Gary realized, clenching his fists. It was then that the high schooler recalled how 5 members of the very same color gang had tried to abduct that girl not too far away from his home. During his time working for the underdogs, Gary had seen that not every member was a scrumbag. Some still had some humanity left inside of them like Kirk, but watching this group of ruffians, they clearly didn't belong in that category. They robbed people, made it so the streets were unsafe, and didn't even think twice about hurting others. In a way, the actual big gangs above them were far more respectable, as they at least made a real effort not to get regular civilians involved. Yet it was different with the color gangs. Hey, didn't you hear me? I've asked what group you're from. The black color gang member repeated his question, but Gary just kept looking at the guy with the baseball bat having fun against his helpless victims. What's more, the third member of their group picked up one of the dropped pocket knives and brought it really close to the red color gang member's face. Let me give you a little reminder of what happens if you barge into the wrong territory. Seeing this, Gary couldn't take it anymore. Screw this, the system's right. Gary mumbled. The other person had heard what he had said, but didn't quite understand the context. I don't belong to any of these gangs. The black color gang member needed a moment to glean the meaning behind the last thing the high schooler had said, but by that time a fist was about to connect with him. Gary had also activated his charging heart skill once more, making his fist speed up mid-swing as it aimed right at his opponent's chin, sending him flying to the ground. Gary didn't hesitate as he moved on to the next one. Having watched Gary just knock out his buddy with a single hit, the gang member dropped the pocket knife in a panic, quickly trying to pick it back up. However, that proved to be a big mistake. The moment he looked down, the high schooler took it as his opportunity to kick him square in his face, making him join his buddy in dreamland. Unfortunately for Gary, the last member of the black color gang that was still up was faster on the uptake. Before he could turn around to deal with him, it was Gary's turn to take a beating. Moments after his kick to the face, he felt a strong force on his back, stemming from a baseball bat. Damn it! Why do all these goons have to aim at my ribs? Dash 10 HP. Congratulations. After repeatedly taking a beating, your body has grown stronger. Don't get used to this, though, otherwise people might think you're AM. Endurance +1. Is this really the time to congratulate me? And what the heck is AM? Gary thought, as he could feel the baseball bat continually pound him. He had curled up into a ball, placing his hands above his head to protect it. The only silver lining was that the subsequent hits only took off 5 points of his HP, though he was unsure whether this was because the gang member was exhausted or his boosted endurance. Gritting his teeth, Gary bared through the pain and let the adrenaline take care of the pain. He decided to go for his legs, charging and tackling him, a move he had been practicing in rugby many times before. Lifting him up with his strength, Gary then soon slammed him down on the concrete floor, knocking him out and causing him to drop the bat. Quest reward, 150 EXP. 200 to 460 EXP. You are a lone wolf that is growing. Would you like to force bond marking any of those that you have defeated? 1/5. During the hunt, you will gain additional EXP for each successful mark you have successfully taken down. 1/5. Gary had naturally declined the offer to mark more people. He still didn't understand what a hunt was. He had an idea, but he wasn't prepared to kill people, not if it could be avoided. I still need to figure out how to get rid of Barry's mark. Should I try to talk to him after rugby practice? Gary contemplated. It was getting late, and it was time for Gary to head home. Otherwise, his mother would start to get suspicious. Due to his little fun with the color gangs, he hadn't had the time to go to the gym. It looked like he had to give a miss for today and fail his daily quest. Still, he had gained way more EXP than he would have in the gym. Nevertheless, he imagined that with what he had just done, tensions between the two color gangs were guaranteed to rise, and they would most likely act more cautious by traveling in bigger groups for the foreseeable future. It was unlikely that he would get another chance to farm so much EXP, but just doing it once had already been worth it. Gary might be unable to complete the gym part of his daily quests, but nothing was stopping him from stopping by the shop as he had done these past days to purchase some more protein. After finishing the raw steak away from the eyes of others, the high schooler once again had his energy restored, which helped him heal his injuries. Yet there was still one problem. My money is going down a lot faster than I thought it would. I still don't have a consistent supply. What should I do? I thought Kai would be calling me more often. How long can this last? Gary thought, seeing that he had about $200 or so left out of his total $500, the money from the initial transportation from the underdogs he didn't. He want to touch, planning to give that to his mother somehow. On his way home, Gary was surprised by the scent of raw food. He rubbed his eyes because he could visibly see the scent in the air. It looked like a red mist that led up to a certain apartment. This looks like the same thing I saw at school. It's the trail that allows me to follow those that are marked. So does that mean Barry lives in this area? Gary wondered. It was only a few streets away from where he lived, and he didn't like this thought at all. Sure, Barry often used his status to get what he wanted at school, but that still wasn't enough of a reason to kill him. He might not have been the nicest person, but there were far worse people than him. I can't just turn up at his door, especially not this late. I'll have to try to think of something tomorrow instead. I still have some time before the full moon anyway, and who knows, maybe Tom was just making a big deal out of nothing. Getting home, Gary greeted his mother and sister and ate the dinner that she had left for him quite easily, despite already having eaten 2 kilograms of meat. His stomach just seemed endless ever since he had turned. When trying to go to sleep that night, though, Gary was having trouble. He couldn't stop thinking about what would happen when the full moon was to come out. It didn't help that he could see his sister Amy sleeping on the bed next to him. Then, when the clock went past midnight over to the next day, the system delivered him a new message. The power of the moon is starting to run through your body. The fuller it gets, the more powerful you'll become. Current bonus, all stats +1. Reading the message, Gary could feel that his body felt slightly different. When checking his stats, he could see that each of his 3 base stats now displayed +1 next to them. This was similar to what it looked like when he used Charging Heart, which told him that it was a temporary boost. Wow, I feel so alive right now. Will this seriously continue to happen as we get closer and closer to the full moon? Gary wondered. However, his happiness soon went away as the next set of messages appeared. Your bloodlust grows. 11 days until the next full moon. It was safe to say that after receiving that message in the middle of the night, Gary didn't get the best of sleep. Every time he would close his eyes, his brain would play out images of himself turning into a werewolf who would start clawing out his sister, since she was in the bed right next to his. It wasn't that his body felt like doing it. In fact, although the system claimed that his bloodlust had increased, Gary didn't feel any differences, least of all a sudden desire to harm anyone. The high schooler still felt like his usual self, apart from all the super strength and speed he felt from the powerful moon, but that was becoming more ordinary by the second for Gary. You are exhausted from a lack of sleep. Until you get some proper rest, your energy bar has been lowered to 75%. Well, whose fault is it that I couldn't sleep, you stupid system? Gary thought, irritated, as he made his way to school. Still, even with 82.5 energy, he could still use Charging Heart and do plenty of other things. It was also a pleasant surprise that aside from energy, all his other stats weren't negatively affected in any way due to this. Entering his classroom, there was a brief encounter when Gary and Xian locked eyes with each other. The girl had actually been ready to approach Gary as she had developed a slight interest in him. Alas, unlike yesterday, he didn't pay her any special attention, completely ignoring her greeting, leaving her to just give an awkward wave. The boy had headed straight to his desk, put his bag next to him, and then immediately put his head down. Now that he was in school, a wave of drowsiness came over him, so he planned to use the time before the teacher would arrive to get a quick nap in. Did something happen to him yesterday? Could he not sleep because he lost that fight to me? Xian wondered. Having failed to make up with one person who was supposed to like her, Xian was now very worried about how her conversation would go with the girl who was holding a grudge against her. By the time Tom finally arrived, he found his desk mate lightly snoring on his desk. Since this wasn't Gary's usual behavior, he decided against waking him up. Be it sheer dumb luck, his teachers not caring, or perhaps having some sympathy for Gary, nobody had found a fault with him sleeping through their class. Eventually, it was break time, giving Tom a chance to talk to his friend. Good morning, sleepyhead. Well, technically it's noon now, so how are you feeling? Was your impromptu nap some sort of statement about how useless all this stuff is we're forced to learn, or was it because it's getting closer to a Tom looked left and right to see if anyone else was listening? Full moon. Hearing those words just reminded Gary of what the system had told him. I just couldn't get any sleep yesterday. It's nothing to do with that crap. Gary replied groggily after Tom had woken him up. Come on, why don't we just talk about something else? Sure, but it's kind of important, seeing as we only have 11 more days. Tom said, we have to figure this stuff out. Check if there are any changes. Say, are you going to quit the rugby club? If you don't, someone could seriously get dash. Enough. Gary was so annoyed that he almost shouted. You're nagging me worse than my mom. Look, I know you mean well, and I swear I was thinking about that stuff and also worrying about it. However, I can solve things my own way, and it's hard to explain this stuff, what's happening to me. It was hard on Tom as well. Honestly, he couldn't remember the last time he and Gary had an argument, but lately it seemed like he was stepping on his nerve a little too much, but Tom had to admit he probably was being a little bit too overbearing. Gary was right. He couldn't imagine what it was like to be in his shoes right now. Right now, rugby is actually one of the only things going well for me, so I don't want to give up on something that can keep my mind off of everything else that's happening. Gary replied. When classes had come to an end, instead of heading to the next fighting club like Tom thought Gary would do, they found themselves on the rugby field once again. Due to there being a match coming up next week, they had asked the non-regulars to stay on the bench and observe. This included Tom. The regulars were split into two groups as they had a practice match against one another. Blake and Gary were on one team, while on the opposing team were Gil and Barry, who didn't exactly have good feelings towards the newest member of their team. This is a good chance for me to test a few things out, Gary thought as he looked at his stats. Strength 5 + 1. Dexterity 3, +1. Endurance 9, +1. The boost from the moon was still present, but what Gary wanted to test was how much these small increments of numbers affected him. The whistle blew, and as soon as it did, he activated Charging Heart, his base stats, but he could see that he was also still receiving the 1 extra point of boost from the power of the moon. The ball was in a player's hands, but running past the others on the line, it looked like Gary had come out of nowhere as he tackled the player with the ball, going straight for the legs. The large high school student went down almost instantly, and recovering straight away, Gary was also able to pick up the loose ball that was on the ground. Soon 2 others went to stop him, and he was able to dodge 2 of them with his reflexes and their predictable tackle patterns until he eventually had been hit from the side and piled on by the rest of the team. Has he gotten faster? Heck, even his tackling has gotten better. Blake noticed. "What are you doing, Broccoli Head?" Mr. Root shouted. "I got you, so you could mainly play defense. Did you think your slow self could go for a point all on your own? If you manage to get possession of the ball, I want you to lure them and then pass it." Gary admitted that he got a bit carried away, but his body felt great. It felt so light when using Charging Heart. It was almost addictive. It was a strange feeling suddenly becoming twice the person you once were. As the rest of the game went on, Gary showed off his skills, and it was noticeable to many of them on the field. Gary was soon becoming a prime tackler and a reliable player. He had also tackled Barry thinking that with a touch he might be able to get rid of the marking, but it wasn't that easy. "This is a bunch of crap," Gil said. "Look how much they're praising that guy, just because he's having a good day today. If this keeps happening, Harvey will never be allowed back on the team. We have to do something." It was safe to say that after receiving that message in the middle of the night, Gary didn't get the best of sleep. Every time he would close his eyes, his brain would play out images of himself turning into a werewolf who would start clawing out his sister, since she was in the bed right next to his. It wasn't that his body felt like doing it. In fact, although the system claimed that his bloodlust had increased, Gary didn't feel any differences, least of all a sudden desire to harm anyone. The high schooler still felt like his usual self, apart from all the super strength and speed he felt from the powerful moon, but that was becoming more ordinary by the second for Gary. You are exhausted from a lack of sleep. Until you get some proper rest, your energy bar has been lowered to 75%. Well, whose fault is it that I couldn't sleep, you stupid system? Gary thought, irritated, as he made his way to school. Still, even with 82.5 energy, he could still use Charging Heart and do plenty of other things. It was also a pleasant surprise that aside from energy, all his other stats weren't negatively affected in any way due to this. Entering his classroom, there was a brief encounter when Gary and Exion locked eyes with each other. The girl had actually been ready to approach Gary, as she had developed a slight interest in him. Alas, unlike yesterday, he didn't pay her any special attention, completely ignoring her greeting, leaving her to just give an awkward wave. The boy had headed straight to his desk, put his bag next to him, and then immediately put his head down. Now that he was in school, a wave of drowsiness came over him, so he planned to use the time before the teacher would arrive to get a quick nap in. Did something happen to him yesterday? Could he not sleep because he lost that fight to me? Xin wondered. Having failed to make up with one person who was supposed to like her, Xin was now very worried about how her conversation would go with the girl who was holding a grudge against her. By the time Tom finally arrived, he found his desk, mate lightly snoring on his desk. Since this wasn't Gary's usual behavior, he decided against waking him up. Be it sheer dumb luck, his teachers not caring, or perhaps having some sympathy for Gary, nobody had found a fault with him sleeping through their class. Eventually, it was break time, giving Tom a chance to talk to his friend. "Good morning, sleepyhead. Well, technically it's noon now, so how are you feeling? Was your impromptu nap some sort of statement about how useless all this stuff is we're forced to learn, or was it because it's getting closer to a..." Tom looked left and right to see if anyone else was listening. Full moon. Hearing those words just reminded Gary of what the system had told him. "I just couldn't get any sleep yesterday. It's nothing to do with that crap," Gary replied groggily after Tom had woken him up. "Come on, why don't we just talk about something else?" "Sure, but it's kind of important, seeing as we only have 11 more days." Tom said, "We have to figure this stuff out. Check if there are any changes. Say, are you going to quit the rugby club? If you don't, someone could seriously get dash." Enough. Gary was so annoyed that he almost shouted, "You're nagging me worse than my mom. Look, I know you mean well, and I swear I was thinking about that stuff and also worrying about it. However, I can solve things my own way, and it's hard to explain this stuff, what's happening to me." It was hard on Tom as well. Honestly, he couldn't remember the last time he and Gary had an argument, but lately it seemed like he was stepping on his nerve a little too much. But Tom had to admit he probably was being a little bit too overbearing. Gary was right. He couldn't imagine what it was like to be in his shoes right now. Right now, rugby is actually one of the only things going well for me, so I don't want to give up on something that can keep my mind off of everything else that's happening. Gary replied. When classes had come to an end, instead of heading to the next fighting club like Tom thought Gary would do, they found themselves on the rugby field once again. Due to there being a match coming up next week, they had asked the non-regulars to stay on the bench and observe. This included Tom. The regulars were split into two groups as they had a practice match against one another. Blake and Gary were on one team, while on the opposing team were Gil and Barry, who didn't exactly have good feelings towards the newest member of their team. This is a good chance for me to test a few things out, Gary thought as he looked at his stats. Strength 5 plus 1, Dexterity 3 plus 1, Endurance 9 plus 1. The boost from a moon was still present, but what Gary wanted to test was how much these small increments of numbers affected him. The whistle blew, and as soon as it did, he activated Charging Heart, his base stats, but he could see that he was also still receiving the 1 extra point of boost from the power of the moon. The ball was in a player's hands, but running past the others on the line, it looked like Gary had come out of nowhere as he tackled the player with the ball, going straight for the legs. The large high school student went down almost instantly, and recovering straight away, Gary was also able to pick up the loose ball that was on the ground. Soon 2 others went to stop him, and he was able to dodge 2 of them with his reflexes and their predictable tackle patterns until he eventually had been hit from the side and piled on by the rest of the team. Has he gotten faster? Heck, even his tackling has gotten better. Blake noticed. "What are you doing, Broccoli Head?" Mr. Root shouted. "I got you, so you could mainly play defense. Did you think your slow self could go for a point all on your own? If you manage to get possession of the ball, I want you to lure them and then pass it." Gary admitted that he got a bit carried away, but his body felt great. It felt so light when using Charging Heart. It was almost addictive. It was a strange feeling suddenly becoming twice the person you once were. As the rest of the game went on, Gary showed off his skills, and it was noticeable to many of them on the field. Gary was soon becoming a prime tackler and a reliable player. He had also tackled Barry thinking that with a touch he might be able to get rid of the marking, but it wasn't that easy. "This is a bunch of crap," Gil said. "Look how much they're praising that guy, just because he's having a good day today. If this keeps happening, Harvey will never be allowed back on the team. We have to do something." Barry looked at Gary, but for some reason, ever since he had stood up to him, a chill ran down his spine whenever he saw the other. He either wanted to completely avoid him, or his instincts were telling him that he needed to do whatever he could to get rid of him before he disappeared. "Yeah, but there's nothing we can do." Blake made it abundantly clear that we're not to touch Gary. "If we do something stupid, we might be the ones to get kicked off the team ourselves." Barry replied. Looking over at the benches, Gil's eyes set on someone else. "Fine, we might be unable to touch Gary, but there's someone else that we can go for instead." With rugby not really being interesting to Tom, especially knowing that given his physique he would never amount to anything in that sport, he had decided to play on his phone and keep up to date with whatever he could. That was when he received a notification from the local news channel. Breaking news: murderer on the loose. In the small town of Slough in the Monte area, a husband and wife were found dead in their apartment block this morning. Police have yet to reveal any information on what exactly had occurred, but at the moment they are looking for any tips on their missing son, Billy Brunton. Whoa, I know the police haven't said it outright, but if they are looking for the son and he's missing, doesn't that just make him the prime suspect? What would make someone go so bad that they would kill their parents, though? Tom wondered. It wasn't long after that Gary received a disturbing message from his system, one that he didn't quite understand. After club activities had ended, The members of the rugby team were praising Gary for his skills on the field. The majority of them had been worried about Mr. Root choosing him. After all, Gary had been a member of the club ever since last year, but he had never shown any real talent. Somebody getting better overnight should only be possible in mangas, novels, or on TV. But in reality, it would take a lot of effort. And yet somehow Gary seemed to have gone through some sort of growth spurt since the start of the week. He hadn't grown in height, yet he had still vastly improved in terms of speed and strength. Receiving so much praise was a new experience for Gary. He hadn't really been unpopular in class. In fact, there was nobody in his class who really hated him. If one were to ask his classmates to describe him, most would have probably used class clown or a bit of a weirdo ever since he came back with his new hairstyle. However, his relationship with anyone but Tom had never really progressed past the level of an acquaintance. This feels amazing, Gary thought with a slightly smug smile on his face. Before the system, he had never been particularly good at anything except perhaps for altar trivia, so getting some recognition from his fellow peers, the high schooler discovered that he quite enjoyed the feeling. Walking away from his teammates who had patted him, some playfully, others more seriously, Gary checked over his stats, hoping that one of them might have improved. As expected, he had no such luck. The only change was his energy that was now at 58 points since he had used charging hard a couple of times during their practice. Fortunately, his earlier sleep session had been deemed as enough rest for the system to revert his energy bar back to 100%. Oh, what's this? Gary wondered as he noticed that he had a new notification which hadn't popped up on its own. When did I get it? Was it at night when I finally fell asleep? Or was it during my nap? Clicking on it, it opened up before him. The notification time indicated that it had appeared at 4 a.m. in the morning, which was around the time his desire for sleep had overwhelmed him. Unfortunately, even after reading the message, Gary didn't understand exactly what it was trying to tell him. An omega has been created? What the hell is an omega? Mumbling this question, Gary had been hoping for his system to shed some light on that topic. Alas, it wasn't that type of system. So far, it had only provided him with insight whenever it chose to. Realizing that he had slept through something important, he quickly checked the quest tab, and indeed it had the red dot to show that something had been added to it. Optional quest received. Start your own family. You were young, stupid, and didn't use protection. So now you gotta deal with the aftermath. Turn the Omega into your pack, and turn it into a beta. Quest reward. Unlocking of the pack tab. I'm only 16. What kind of pervert designed this system to ask someone to start a family at my age? I'm not even able to support my own family. So how could I even afford to start another? No wonder this quest is optional. Gary felt a strong urge to punch the creator. Nevertheless, since those strange messages had appeared through the werewolf system, he was sure that they were important. Gary was sincerely hoping that his best friend might be more familiar with those terms and would be able to make some more sense out of those. I believe I did stumble upon those terms when looking into your special condition, Tom said, as he checked their surroundings, making sure nobody paid close attention to them. However, that wasn't too much a problem. The players who had actually been running around were now in the showers, while those like Tom, who had done nothing but warm the benches, had quickly changed into their normal clothes and already left. However, I don't know if they really apply to you. Like I said, there is a bunch of different lore for everything, and who knows which one's true. In case you've forgotten, the silver pendant that most of those sources had agreed should be your bane had done nothing at all, whereas chocolate nearly became your cause of death. Look, get some good rest today. You still look dead tired. Tomorrow's Saturday, so if you want, can both head to the library and do some research. Well, knowing you, I'll probably end up as the one to do all the research to figure out what these things mean most likely. Say, where did you even hear those terms from anyway? Gary was trying to figure out how to answer Tom. After all, he hadn't informed him about the system part of his transformation into a werewolf. Well, given my special condition, I looked some things up by myself. It's a bit of the reason why I'm so tired, actually. Gary answered, touching the back of his head. But like you said, everything is too confusing, so I didn't really get most of it. Tom looked at his friend for a few seconds. He still remembered how Gary had told him off just this morning for talking about werewolves too much, and now he was asking him for help. Were it not for his earlier outburst, he might have yanked on his best friend's chains by playfully demanding a date with Amy in return. But in the end, Tom just nodded. All right, then it's a deal. We'll meet at the public library at noon. While we're at it, we could also look up other things about the moon and stars and such. Although Tom didn't say it, he was thinking of ways and learning of what exactly happened on a full moon. Instead of instigating another fight, Gary had once again stopped by the supermarket before heading to the gym. Following the instructions the system provided, Gary had worked out until the system had rewarded him with 5 EXP. It was a welcome surprise, since he had been half expecting it to be cut down to 1 EXP or less, seeing that it had been cut in half once he had hit level 2. Still, he was a bit down that he had not experienced any other physical improvements. He understood that it would take him far less time than normal people, but he still couldn't help but be a bit impatient, not knowing when he might need to be more powerful. For once, Gary was able to head home like a normal high schooler. Kai's phone was still dead silent, so he decided to spend his evening with his family, something he didn't get to do often. As it turned out, just because he had time didn't mean the rest of the world would exceed his desires. Shortly after he came home, his mother had rushed out because work had asked her to replace one of her coworkers, leaving the 2 teenagers on their own. In turn, Amy seemed more interested in spending time with her cell phone than spending precious time with her brother. If only we had more money, Mom wouldn't have to work so hard, Gary thought. While enjoying his meal, Gary also paid attention to the TV that had been left on a news channel. The high schooler was very interested in the local part, since it had allowed him to keep up to date with things that were going on in SLU. Especially interesting were any updates to the gang situation, and Gary was currently even more interested about any new discoveries in the case of the recent killings that Gary himself might have been involved in. Today, the channel was reporting on a different story, though. The breaking news that was playing all day were about 2 individuals who had been killed in their own home. Gary had been in the middle of cutting up a piece of steak and eating it like a normal human would, until he saw the image of the deceased couple's missing son appear on screen. What the hell? That's Billy Buster, Gary blurted out. How do you know that guy? According to the news, he doesn't go to your school, Amy asked. Despite her appearance, she had actually also been paying attention to the news, but Gary ignored her. I knew he was a scumbag for using those brass knuckles on me, but I never figured him for a murderer. What's more, to kill his parents, Gary thought, the steak in front of him, losing some of its taste. With Gary having his own plans again, at one point he had parted ways with Tom. Unbeknownst to the both of them, this turned out to be a mistake. Tom had been lost in his own thoughts, walking pretty much on autopilot, until he hit a meaty wall. Looking up, he saw a familiar face, and when he took a few steps back, he bumped into someone else. Gil, Barry, how nice to see you. If you don't mind, I kind of need to get home, Tom said nervously, already aware that that wasn't happening. Neither one of them should be living in this direction, and judging by the sneaky manner that they had appeared, they weren't just there to have a friendly chat with him.